I mean, let's exclude the irony of Democrats and liberals thinking that inflation is going to be an issue after the 4-year window we just got through.
That the left seems to understand how tariffs work, and the logic can be applied to any form of taxation, and they somehow don't understand it.
All those jobs are in China. That is the almost entire part of it.
So manufacturing output in the U.S. is actually, it was going up all the way up until 2008. It was going up during the entire China shock period. Well, these jobs were supposedly being offshore to China, but manufacturing employment was going down. That indicates that, hey, maybe there are just productivity increases in these sectors.
Immigrants, where most of the people who come here and they work.
And they drive down wage for the average American. But
there's not really any good evidence for that.
That's not true, actually, but you'll reject all evidence we present on that point. I'll predict that in the future.
What's the evidence? How much money do you think is not fraud, waste, or abuse?
99
Social Security, 90, yeah.
Almost all of it.
If you want to see more content like this, I would really appreciate you liking and subscribing. It really helps with the algorithm. And make sure to check out the Discord and other social links in the description.
Okay. Sorry for being a little late today. Some tech issues. We're getting through it. Welcome to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Today we're going to be discussing the economy. Trump has recently made a lot of moves economically, implementing tariffs, rescinding tariffs. He's also made several statements to Europe just today, claiming he's going to want to put on a 200% tariff on spirits, alcohol, etc., coming from Europe into the U.S. The stock market. If we look at the stock market, it doesn't seem to be going well. Dow Jones is down. The S&P is down. However, statements have been made that this is just temporary, and once it gets going, the economy will be great and smooth. So today we're going to be talking about, should we be worried about the economy? Why should we be worried about the economy? Is Trump the right person to fix the economy? Why or why not? And what should he do in order to get it better? Let's start with Econoboi. Tell people who you are, what your thoughts are, and we'll get into it. Cool?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I'm Econoboi. I do a lot of economics and politics content, mostly on podcasts nowadays, but I also have a Substack, econoboi.substack.com, where I have been writing a lot of stuff. So go there if you want a bunch of leftist nonsense dribble, as I like to call it. And then when it comes to the topic at hand, I think overall the economy is kind of pittering along. It seems like the economy is slowing down in some respects. It's very difficult to say, definitively, if we're going to have a recession anytime soon. That's a very difficult thing to predict, but it seems like the economic data that we have shows a slowing economy. Now, we've had economic data like this before that doesn't end up being a recession, just kind of a slowdown until maybe an eventual greater expansion. But certainly, to Wick's point, all the uncertainty with regards to Trump's trade wars and trade uncertainty and volatility, that's very bad for the economy, the trade wars themselves, and also the uncertainty surrounding them. And so I certainly don't support all of that. And if the Republicans get their wish list, which is to cut trillions of dollars out of the welfare state, certainly that would be disastrous for the economy, and certainly most disastrous for the poorest among us. And so I think that overall this Republican economic agenda is pretty bad. I give it 2 thumbs down.
2 thumbs down. Okay, well, thank you for being here, Econoboi. Always appreciate you coming on, giving your thoughts. We'll get into it as we go. James Meese, what are your thoughts here? Who are you? And give us your opening statement. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm James Meese. Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Wick. I appreciate it. Nice to be with Econoboi, too. I'm following your Substack. I think, yes, we should be worried. I think the most important thing for us is to reduce our debt burden. Our deficit is something like 7% of our GDP. Probably needs to be about 3%. That's Ray Dalio type thinking. I think we can achieve this through spending less and more efficiency, like DOGE, growth, like with AI, and a lower rate on the refinancing of the debt is the other thing. If we don't get that under control, then basically everything else in society is at risk. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the military, it's all at risk if we have a debt spiral, let's say. And no great nation has ever survived or has ever stayed at the top for long once they spend more on debt than they do on defense, and we're there now. So I say if Trump ends up spending less than Biden, that's a win. If Trump gets the deficit spending down to 3% of GDP, that will put us on more firm footing. I highly doubt we achieve a budget surplus, but if we did that by some miracle, that would be amazing. And that's my opening statement, so let's have a good show.
Yeah, we will get into it. Thank you for being here. Nonfon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the economy is going to go into a recession just because of what Trump is doing. But I mean, I do think the policies, like tariffs, and again, the uncertainty around what tariffs will actually end up being imposed is bad for the economy. And you will see reduced investment, and you will see reduced consumer confidence. I don't think DOGE is going to save any meaningful amount of money. It seems like they would need Congress to actually do that. And when it comes to Congress, it looks like we're just getting another round of tax cuts without any significant spending reductions in the areas we are spending reductions or decreasing spending. It seems like that's going to have very distributionally negative effects. And the last thing I'll add is I am really worried about what Trump might do with the Federal Reserve, and if him or even DOGE tries to, in some sense, politically corrupt it.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. Nonfon, always a pleasure, and we'll get into it as we go. Let's try it, okay? NewYorkShade, are you here? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Check.
Wonderful.
Awesome,
Very nice.
Okay.
Got the IT down. All right.
Beautiful. Go ahead,
nice
give
to
us
meet-
your thoughts.
Yeah, nice to meet all of you. In terms of should we be worried about the economy? The answer there is absolutely yes, but that is because globalism has failed us all across the globe. Free trade is an absolute myth. It has gutted our core industrial industries like auto, shipbuilding, manufacturing, and barred us from entering new ones like chip manufacturing. We are a consumer economy now because we don't produce anything anymore. And as such, we are extremely exposed to foreign wars and black swan events. The question is, what happens when foreign shipbuilders we rely on get attacked? What happens if China conquers Taiwan? Where do we get our chips from? What happens if we face another pandemic and the pharmaceuticals that are produced elsewhere? If you think a 10% market correction was bad, wait until any of these crises unfold. On top of that all, nothing is affordable anymore. 60% of people live paycheck to paycheck. For the first time in history, it is impossible for the average American to purchase a home. We need core blue-collar jobs with competitive wages, and those have been offshored. The solution is wide strategic tariffs that safeguard and build up our industries, while we alleviate the hit on one-time consumer price increases by lowering taxes, reducing government spending, and drill, baby, drill.
Okay, well, appreciate you being here. I'm so glad you got your mic working. This panel wouldn't be the same without you. So thanks for being here. We'll get into it as we go. Somewhat of a surprise guest, and this is on me, okay, because my administration skills are lacking. Juno, please give us your thoughts and tell people who you are. What you
I don't
think?
even think the page. I
Yeah,
thought we
you
were all
need
going
unpaid
to
interns
agree
or
that
something
tariffs
to
are bad, but
manage your
damn.
Yeah, like similar-ish to Econoboi and Nonfon. I don't think we can definitively say there's a recession coming. I think we are approaching that point where we can say, 3 consecutive quarters of the GDP going down. Like we are set to do this quarter, probably will do next quarter if they keep doing the things that they're doing. And I don't see any reason why they would change. And so I think I'm probably the most negative on a potential recession of anyone in this call, most likely. And I think all of their strategies, yes, literally all of them, are bad at helping us not have a recession. And instead they're encouraging recessions. I think some of the things that I've already heard are a little ridiculous, cutting taxes, but also we're worried about the debt. And so I think obviously we'll talk about those. But yeah, I think we are on a bad path. And some of the ideas I've already heard would make us in an even worse path. So, yeah.
Well, I do appreciate you being here. And I apologize that there was some kind of fucky-wucky stuff going on. My bad entirely. This is entirely my fault. Go ahead. Fabian Liberty Scott, please.
Yeah, my name is Fabian Liberty. You can call me Scott. Fabian Liberty pretty much everywhere, streaming on YouTube. And I apologize if I'm not super energetic. I got the virus that shall not be named on YouTube censorship algorithm thing, and I'm still recovering a little bit. But yeah, I'm excited for a conversation tonight because I sit in a somewhat not both sides position. I hate kind of like a lot of things as a libertarian. I think a recession is inevitable, not necessarily under the Trump administration, right? But we have unless we are able to do something significant about our debt, unless we are able to do something about home buying prices, unless we're able to do something about the price of cars, which obviously steel tariffs isn't going to help. We saw that before. There's a lot of bad that the Trump administration is doing, and I think there's also a lot of good that the Trump administration is doing. And to that effect, he's kind of, he was elected to be a bull in a china shop, right? Like the system of like flipping between Democrats and Republicans that are only substantively different on, 10% of policy has kind of, has brought us Trump, like it or not, whether you're a leftist or a rightoid, this is, you're going to see it's inevitable that you're going to see a small short-term downturn in the economy when there's instability, because every other politician that got elected, all of the corporations knew exactly what they were in for, which was the same fucking game, but we're going to change percentages 2%. And it's been kind of like a really big problem. I think a lot of what Trump is doing are things I vehemently disagree with. And a lot of those are really good. And I kind of want to get through those piecemeal, hopefully looking at it from probably the sole Austrian-minded individual here to give that perspective. And I'm excited for the conversation.
Okay, I am too. And thank you all for being here. Thank you to my audience. If you end up liking this stuff, hit that like, subscribe button, and we'll get into it. I will read the super chats at the top of the hour. Keep them coming. Don't stop, right? But we're going to get into the discussion before we get into the super chats. Thank you very much. Well, I guess I'll just start off, right? So let's take the stock market out of it. Let's take the S&P, all that stuff, right? You're an average, everyday citizen in America today. What is Trump's economic plan going to do for you? Either positive or negative. What are we thinking? And it's an open discussion. If you have trouble getting in your word in edgewise, just like raise your hand or DM me or something. But yeah, the floor's open. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you'll probably see some small increases depending on what tariffs actually implemented in consumer prices. I think that many people are likely going to lose their welfare benefits, be it SNAP, be it Medicare. And I think that there will probably end up being net job losses through both the tariffs themselves and the uncertainty around them.
Does anyone disagree with that?
I might. So I want to pick apart this from two perspectives, right? So number one, I think there's something important to note, that I think consumer confidence and the way people feel about the economy has a pretty significant impact on the economy itself, right? So we can look at, data and charts, and, we can do an analysis of why tariffs are going to be harmful. Obviously NewYorkShade will do the opposing analysis, right? But I think psychologically it is important to note that, like, even in the most recent job numbers, there was basically very little change from Bureau of Labor Statistics, but we did see a significant change in people that felt hopeless about the economy. So while, the econo-bros and the nerds and people like us here have a lot to worry about, and while investors, right, that are trying to figure out long-term investments, but they have no fucking clue what's going to happen on April 2nd. So how do they do long-term investments at least until April 2nd? And we figure out what Trump's supposedly, goal is with all of these tariff deals. The average everyday American feels a lot more confident about the economy. And that means people are, dropping out of, likely soon to drop out of the, the labor, back into labor participation, back into looking for jobs. And there are jobs for those people, which I would say is like a good thing, right? It's a kind of like a psychological thing. In terms of like predicting the future of what will happen to the average American, it is wildly too soon to be able to really get to that level of detail to know what's going to happen to them. Like whether you're lefty, righty, whatever, like we're only a couple months in. We don't know what the full goals are. We don't know what negotiations or tactics. We don't know what the tax policy is going to look like. We don't know what ERS revenue is going to bring. Like, there's way too many unknown factors. So anybody that sells you that they have an idea of like what's going to happen to the average American is probably full of shit. I don't mean that to target you specifically, Nonfon. You were the first one to step up and give a prediction. I'm not like trying to be like, oh, you piece of shit.
I mean, like I opened, like I'm not sure any of us can make super strong predictions. And I will also add, I mean, I think in consumer sentiment, you see a lot of partisan swings. So I think like inflation expectations for Democrats are way up. Inflation expectations for Republicans are way down. And the same thing in, consumer sentiment. It seems like psychologically Democrats don't feel that well off. And I think consumers will feel the effects of higher prices from tariffs, even if that ends up being pretty low salience, and psychologically they will feel an effect on their wallet.
I mean, let's exclude the irony of Democrats and liberals thinking that inflation is going to be an issue after the 4-year window we just got through. What is important is the long-term macroeconomic trajectory of this country. This economy through the late 1800s and the 1900s was built on blue collar work. It was built on manufacturing. It was built on automobiles. It was built on shipbuilding. Those jobs have all been offshored. And when we see new industries of material goods, I'm not talking about the transfer of data or consulting or services, which isn't a good. We're looking at something that we are no longer exposed to, and we can't even get a foot in the door because labor overseas is infinitely much cheaper. We see this with microchips today. We are just blockading ourselves from anything that can get our average American back on their jobs with competitive wages, able to afford a house. And what people are bought into today isn't a 10% market correction in the first 50 days of Trump. It's a broader economic vision of right-sizing an economy that has been extremely eviscerated by globalist, quote-unquote, free trade policies, which we all know is a myth to begin with.
Well, look, let's exclude the irony of a conservative saying he cares about manufacturing and then voting for a guy who is explicitly in favor of getting rid of a lot of those same exact pro-manufacturing policies that Biden actually implemented, which caused a boom in construction spending. Which caused a boom in construction spending in this country, not in other countries. But we're excluding that. This is a conversation about Trump, obviously. Look, I mean, this is similar. I'll take it to Obama, right? In 2012, he was debating Mitt Romney about the military, and Romney was talking about, we don't have as many ships as we used to have, right, in the Navy. And Obama's point was, well, look, the Navy changes. The nature of our military has changed because technology is getting better and the nature of our economy can transition. The problem that these communities have is not that, we lost out on having a particular job. Like, that is sort of nominally the problem that they have. But one of the problems that we have fundamentally in this economy, which is a problem that only members of the left actually give a shit about, is that we don't have a good system for distributing gains of trade in this country. How do you do that? You do that with welfare. You do that with public institutions. You do that with good government services. That's what many other countries have figured out. It's one of the reasons why many other countries don't have these same problems, even though they've gone through the exact same deindustrializations that the Americas have gone through.
Hold on,
Response?
I have a lot to say about that, but I'll try and keep it
Sounds
simple.
Crazy if you just don't know what you're talking about. But anyway, go on, Fabian. You know what you're talking about, though, Fabian. I was talking to the other guy.
It's so the issue here is that you guys have the same socialist argument as far as I'm concerned, and this is why is that the right has this argument that tariffs and economic protectionism is going to give us manufacturing jobs. And my question and response is, at what cost, right? Because like a basic understanding of economics knows that the reason those jobs aren't here is because of the fact that it is too expensive, as NewYorkShade put forward. It's too expensive because the labor market overseas is cheaper, etc. Now, I don't understand. It's so crazy to me when I hear the left respond to this, because I have an issue with that, because that's a socialist mindset, and I hate socialism. Just because it's got an R next to its name, that doesn't mean I magically like it. But my issue is then the response to that is but Biden had these cool policies that boosted construction, and the question is well, at what cost?
Well, Fabian, I set that aside. I set that aside.
Yeah, I'm sure you you set it aside, right?
I set it aside.
You have a quip,
because this is a conversation
and then you don't want me
about Trump.
to address it.
But it's
Right,
also
but
infrastructure
but
spending for
but
like,
it is also
ourself.
it's
It's
to
not restoring jobs,
it's a
right?
it's a broader conversation that the left seems to understand how tariffs work, and the logic can be applied to any form of taxation, and they somehow don't understand it the moment it goes against anything that isn't Trump. Like tax the rich, right? This concept that you constantly espouse, Econoboi, right? The same arguments that you use to destroy tariffs and why they have a negative impact on the economy because the prices go down to the consumer is the exact same fucking arguments against wealth redistribution and tax the rich that you have. So you're speaking out of two sides of your mouth in a contradiction economically, and then you kind of use a lot of verbal wizardry to cover that
We had
up.
a.
And,
let me-
I'm sick of the
I gotta
socialists, man.
respond.
I do
Yeah,
want to.
go.
I do want to give Econoboi a chance to respond, but I also want to give Shade a chance to respond to you. We had a little bit of a technical hiccup on my end. My bad, right? So I missed a little bit of the back and forth, but I'm caught up now. So Econoboi, go ahead and respond. And I know Shade, if you want, you can respond to Econoboi's claims, and then we'll get some other people in here. Cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to Fabian's point, this isn't really hypocritical. This is sort of like saying, well, because Fabian has this very like myopic view of the world, right? And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Obviously, it's just like his view is basically that essentially anything that's not anarcho-capitalism is just socialism. So we're just talking about different kinds of socialism. So you're talking about like, oh, the guy in the hat says,
If you're going to
well,
respond to me, don't say what my positions are and then mischaracterize them. If you want to
I'm
know
not
what
mischaracterizing them.
anarcho-capitalism is,
You said
You're one
said
drop
any
bro.
Hey, we're not
you
here
have
to
said-
define anarcho-capitalism. Just making that clear, okay?
You literally just said that
Right,
we're
yeah.
just two different kinds of socialists,
his-
right? And so my point is saying that, look, obviously when this guy talks about tariffs and I'm talking about a welfare redistribution state, those are just two different policies. You can say they're two different kinds of socialism, but obviously I think I'd have a reason to believe that one is better than the other, right? And again, I referenced other countries and what they do. I mean, I think there's a reason to think that putting tariffs on everything not only doesn't really bring back manufacturing. If you cared about that, I set aside the hypocrisy of voting against Joe Biden and not supporting him, who actually did do a lot of policies that would directly do those things. But if we actually did care about these communities that have been completely left behind, we would invest in those communities directly, not try to, redistribute the market jobs of society by putting tariffs on everything, which ultimately is just a way to sort of socialize the sort of cost of those jobs, when rather we could have a much more flexible economy by just, investing in good services that these people can take out of and, giving them job opportunities that way in a much more market-friendly sense.
I just want to be very quickly, I just want to point out that you didn't actually address a single argument that I made, that you only memed on the political ideology that I espouse and then restated your positive
I
positions.
think I
which
addressed it
critiqued.
directly. If anyone
No, you
disagrees,
didn't,
feel free
actually, at
to
all.
feel free to explain.
People can watch the VOD and decide for themselves. I want to give Shade a
Decide
chance
for
to
themselves.
respond. Yeah, I want to get Shade a chance to respond, and I also want to get Meese in there, and I know Juno and Nonfon have stuff they want to say. So go ahead, Shade, and we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Fabian on this, that there's kind of an irony of the criticism by the left of saying, tariffs are going to hit the consumer and the rise of consumer goods or consumer good pricing. And then meantime, they'll support something like raising the corporate tax rate or taxing the wealthy, which is also just going to increase the cost of consumer prices and make everything more expensive without increasing wages at the same time, which tariffs would accomplish. And let's not pretend like there isn't historical precedent for successful tariffs. McKinley is very well known for this, and he was actually hated and voted out of office for implementing these tariffs because of the short-term price gains on consumer goods. They disbanded those tariffs after the next president was put into office, but then in 1897, they re-implemented 50% widespreading tariffs. That completely built up and set the groundwork for industrialization within the United States. The tin industry was completely propped up by these tariffs and protectionist agreements. And because of that, we were war ready in the world wars. The average blue-collar worker on minimum wage with a spouse was easily able to afford an average home, and that is all out the window. So to say that we don't have precedent for tariffs working successfully, particularly in an environment where we're on the back heel like we are today, is asinine at best. And to say that the solution is to tax people more, i.e. taking away their spending power, is just an abysmal policy. It's doubling down on all the things that have failed us over the past few decades.
Okay, let's talk about it. Tariffs have come up on the table, protectionism, etc. Anyone want to respond directly to what Shade said here?
Yeah, I have so many issues. Oh boy. Okay,
Okay, let's go
so
Juno, then Nonfon. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think NewYorkShade has a complete mischaracterization of what this country's problems are and how bad they are. Um, and I also think that he is applying a massive, massive blanket policy to something that needs a very specifically tailored response. So, for example, he mentioned like the chip manufacturing. Turns out the president that he almost certainly didn't vote for was the one that brought like chip manufacturing back to the country. And I agree that there's like national security reasons to want to have
Where are
those,
the chips?
in the country. The money's being spent as we speak. Your president is the one that doesn't want that money to be spent on reshoring chip manufacturing, and it's actually being built right now in Arizona. Just FYI. So, like, I agree that in some specific instances, like super important national security reasons, it is good to have maybe not tariffs, but at least investment to help build up our own production capacity of those things as well. But if you need to do hyper targeted tariffs on those too, sure, fine. But these blanket tariffs on like on an entire country's like exports is just like ridiculous and isolates us from the rest of the country. On the stuff that Fabian was saying, I think there's no irony here at all, and I think Econoboi did explain it. I just don't think you were listening, which is that a lot of the things that were passed were internal investment in this country. So, for example, the infrastructure bill was internal building and building up our infrastructure, and not taxes on external goods coming into the country. And taxes themselves are pretty unique from tariffs in that we are taking it from our own people and spending it on our own people versus raising the prices of goods coming into the country from elsewhere. And so you can claim that the end result is just prices going up. I would obviously disagree for a number of different types of taxes that prices
So would I,
go up.
but of course you're busy strawmanning my position instead of actually arguing against my arguments. It's okay.
Okay, do you want to explain it well instead of badly so we can know what your position is?
Yeah, so the critique that I gave, right, is that the same logic applies to both in terms of price increases. That is not the same thing as they are exactly the same because price increases, right? These are two so totally separate things. I obviously understand that there's a meaningful distinction between a tariff and a corporate tax rate, or else they would be the same thing, right? I mean, corporate taxes in America have remained relatively stable, where a lot of OECD countries have kind of dropped them over time for a variety of reasons. But look, I understand. Well, no, I don't want to get into argumentation beyond
a clarifying question.
What you were saying.
Clarifying question. Is this essentially just saying that because both tariffs and taxation have a risk of raising prices at the end point where people are purchasing goods or services, that because of that you think they are the same, just because the end result might be the same?
No, what I'm saying is, and what I repeated multiple times in my initial argument, is what is the cost, right? So what I'm saying is when you are using government force and violence to, take most valued resources away from their most valued means and instead interject in the market to redistribute wealth or to engage in economic protectionism, then you need to then what is the cost? Specifically, I was critiquing the bullshit argument that Econoboi was making that he then set aside is, oh, Biden had these policies, they created construction jobs, therefore good. And I'm saying that is devoid of recognizing that every policy, every tax dollar that's spent, every regulation that is added to the market has some negative impact on the economy. And so
you recognize the method in which
it's
he created
good.
the jobs was different. You recognize that the method in which the jobs were created, the construction jobs, was different than tariffs. And you at minimum recognize that, right?
Yeah,
that a different method and procedure was used.
I feel like I just said that. Like,
okay.
As long
as you're okay with like knowing that there is a distinction and accepting that, and then the argument just becomes, are tariffs the same impact and badness as taxes? Then that's fine.
It's not like that wasn't my argument. That was what I was critiquing, is that you guys are responding to an argument I'm not making.
Okay. Well, now you've explained it 4 times, and I still don't know what exactly you're trying to say. So
I think
I don't know how to help you in that, brother.
We do got to move on, and we do got to get to the other people involved, right? And I want to give Shade a chance to respond because you did call him out. So Shade, go ahead if you have some things to say. So.
No, I'm good. I'll pass.
Okay. Nonfon, what do you got?
Okay, I don't want to like go back to this, but I will say I think a lot of the objectives of like the Biden subsidies were national, security reasons, right? And like there's a good chance they ended up being like a net job loss and they crowded out other spending. But I mean, that wasn't really our objective wasn't to bring manufacturing back and have a blue collar revolution. It was just to onshore some chip manufacturing so that, you know, the whole China-Taiwan situation is less of a threat. And I think that was a good thing. And I think so far it seems like the subsidies have been fairly effective. You know, obviously it takes a while to get these factories set up, but I believe 2 or 3 of them actually already are producing some chips at least. And I also will mention, just for shade, I don't think trade is the reason that we lost most of our manufacturing jobs in the first place. I mean, you know, we have empirical estimates of this. Another suspect is just productivity increases. Automation.
Okay, how do we lose those jobs then? Just
I just said
offshoring to China.
Right. So that, I mean, undeniably, I'm sure that was part of it. But also, again,
I'm sure that's the biggest
productivity
part of it.
increases.
The biggest.
Those jobs are in China. That is the almost entire part of it.
Well, what causes the
doesn't
labor
so
here
manufacturing,
is more valuable and productive, right?
Okay,
manufacturing output.
Let Nonfon answer the question. Nonfon, go
Sure.
ahead.
So manufacturing output in the U.S. is actually it was going up all the way up until 2008. It was going up during the entire China shock period. Well, these jobs were supposedly being offshore to China, but manufacturing employment was going down. That indicates that, hey, maybe
control for population, dude.
True. There were just productivity increases in these sectors, right? And there's empirical estimates to back it up. In fact, the highest estimate I've seen of jobs lost to trade versus jobs lost to productivity is like 43% lost to trade, and the rest lost to productivity. Yeah.
Is this a distinction without a difference, right? Like if our productivity goes up, right, and the value of labor in America goes up, and then therefore that pushes jobs overseas to trade partners because the value of labor is lower. Like I feel like this is a distinction without a difference. Like we're talking about the same thing, and then being like, it's not trade, it's productivity. Like I don't really understand the argument here. Is like
no, that wasn't the mechanism.
I feel like you're using 2 different terms to say the same thing.
The mechanism would be companies just need less people because there are productivity enhancements. Not necessarily. I mean, I understand obviously as a side effect of that, American wages will go up because productivity is increased. But also manufacturing companies, if they can produce more with less people, they might, you know, end up firing some people.
But like we're using different levels of like describing the same phenomena, right? Like if we talk about productivity increasing and then therefore there's less jobs, you know, as opposed to productivity increasing, therefore there's more exports, right? Then it comes down to exactly what NewYorkShade is talking about. Like I don't like tariffs, right? I'm not on NewYorkShade's side here, right? But like I feel like you're just describing the same thing as him.
No, let me take a shot at
saying it in
like,
a different way.
Yeah, give it to Econoboi. And I just want to apologize to everyone. I don't know what is with my tech today. My internet connection is very bad today, and I apologize. Hopefully, I don't know. I just don't know. Let's give it to Econoboi, and let's keep going.
We might be talking to
other
ourselves
streams,
here,
hopefully.
boys. Yeah.
No, you're talking to me, right? No, there's people. They can see us, I think, on my screen, but it keeps going in and out. But go ahead, Econoboi. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the reason why what Nonfon is saying is different is because, like, Shade has this idea that because basically there's cheap labor abroad and, like, we have these free trade agreements and this, like, free movement of, you know, relatively free movement of, like, capital across borders, that's the reason, like, that's, like, the thing, that's the mechanism by which tariffs would get our jobs back. But what Nonfon's essentially saying is that, well, hey, if most of these jobs are lost just because basically manufacturing processes have become so much more efficient that you don't need to hire as many people domestically to do the same exact amount of work, then those jobs are never coming back because of tariffs, or at least a very, very large, meaningful portion of them are never coming back because of tariffs. And that's kind of the reason why Nonfon's pointing out, well, this is a bit of a nonsensical thing, even if you think that tariffs are good because they, like, forget about everything else that we say about tariffs. I just think they're good because they bring jobs back. Well, that's an effect that's significantly depressed by the fact that most of those jobs are gone because of just productivity increases.
Okay. I get that. I guess I was false in presuming that there is an assumption of like a fixed pie of like production, right? Like, because there's no, I mean, like, if I were to take the tariff argument seriously, right, like devil's advocate here, and obviously NewYorkShade should be the one to respond, not me, but like if I would assume that mechanism
so if
works
that's the case,
that way,
and
right,
Shade
you can just produce more
instead of you.
Well,
Why don't we let Shade respond?
Let me ask this question to the people refuting my claim here. China heavily subsidizes all of their goods via the government to basically crowd out international production and make them the most competitive on the international scene, which is why we've seen an absolute surge in production coming out of China. My question to you would be, how do you defend against that?
Well, I mean, do you defend our agricultural subsidies, which other countries complain heavily about? Do you think it's
That's
good
not
that we
even
do that?
on the same remote scale as what China
It's actually
is.
on an incredible scale. Like, literally, one of the reasons why Mexicans don't like NAFTA is because we destroyed their farming sector with all of our Do you think that's good that we do that?
Or one specific sector, sure, maybe. I
Right.
don't think
It's just in our like it might be in our national interest, and like similarly, like what a lot of very very pro trade people will say is, hey, if
So
China,
if we can subsidize because it's in our national interest, why can we not implement tariffs if it's in our national interest?
well, I'm not. What are you talking about? I think all three of us would agree that in some circumstances, tariffs might be in our national interest. Like I like to use the example of why don't we tariff chocolate coming from the Ivory Coast because they use like child slave labor to give us chocolate. Like that seems like a pretty fucked up thing that we might want to tariff to disincentivize.
Cringe.
But forget about that for a second. Like
God,
obviously,
we're
it
wrong
might be
about
in our
that.
national interest in some like political analysis. But at the same time, you could just say, well, wouldn't it be in our national interest to allow Chinese citizens to subsidize our lifestyles by subsidizing exports? Like we're getting cheap goods on the backs of Chinese taxpayers. Seems like a good deal to me.
Or why don't we implement tariffs and make it too expensive to export Chinese goods into the United States, then propping up the industry within the United States and increasing wages? It's I feel like we're going around in a loop here.
Because the
there's
reason we
also,
would
like-
say that, well, just 1 second, James, I'm sorry. The reason we would say that is because the actual net subsidy, like if you were to compare the outcomes, like, oh, wages rise a little bit, we have a little bit more manufacturing jobs because of tariffs, and we have this sort of tax revenue from tariffs that we can use for a social purpose. If you compare all that financial gain to the loss in terms of people spending a lot more of their income on consumption products that they otherwise would spend much less of their money on, it's way, way less, right? We lose so much more than we gain from tariffs. That's why we fundamentally think this is a bad idea.
Yeah, I
Hey,
I was
I'm not
gonna
frozen again, am I? Right? Like it's just
No.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like the reason I would be more worried about China and I'm less concerned about the tariffs thing is they're making all the robots, right? And robots are the future. Like they're making 90% of the robots. They're going to have all the humanoid robots. They're going to have all the drones. So like the wars of the future, the production of the future, they're making it all, right? Like all of it. Like we need to make it here. So if tariffs help us do that, then we should support them for that reason. Even though I'm not a fan of tariffs, generally speaking, in the long term, the places that our society is going, which is, humanoid robots everywhere, drones everywhere, that kind of stuff is all, like the whole entire supply chain is so thoroughly developed in China that we really need to get it going here, like yesterday.
So
I mean,
to respond, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean,
Not
real quick, I would actually semi-agree. I do think that we should actually tariff drone parts. I think it's bad that a lot of drones are made in China because those are necessary for our military. What
The
I also
rare
say
earths,
is that
all that stuff, I mean,
what I also say is that it seems like subsidies a lot of times are just more effective. Like we have evidence that tariffs tend to reduce productivity, and it doesn't seem like some subsidies have the same or as big a negative effects on labor productivity. I mean, a sales tax a tariff is actually just equivalent to a sales tax plus a subsidy. But what makes the tariff so bad is that other countries respond, and that hurts us in other ways. Whereas if we were to raise revenue through a more efficient mechanism, it wouldn't be, that effect would not be as negative.
I take
so
this
this
different
is-
view.
this
Like,
is-
like
this
the
is
reason
why-
why. Like, I'll
Okay,
just
all
go,
three of you
like-
try to talk about once at a time. We're gonna let Fabian respond, and we're gonna let I'll give you each a chance. So Fabian first, then we'll go take it to Shade, then we'll take it to James. Go ahead.
Yeah, see, this is why I was like, it's incumbent upon me to be the libertarian here, because like even the examples that are being used here really just go to show how we're like adding more government to solve government problems, and it's just so nonsensical to me. Like the reason that China produces so many drone technology, for example, so we have a fuck ton of laws and regulations that make it exceedingly expensive to produce drone parts and drone technology here. So the answer isn't some new tariff, some new tax. The answer is to just get the fucking government out of letting the market be able to have these solutions. So the thing here is that like there was an argument made that, well, productivity is the real reason that, that the trade deficit is such an issue here, because American labor is so productive. Well, it's like, okay, when we're talking about things like chip manufacturing, if we're talking about things like robotics, AI, which by the way, AI is already predominantly in America, but fair enough.
If it is true,
right?
that,
we're talking about these
we can't make drones here because of regulation.
high IQ positions.
I would say get rid of that regulation.
You have to ask yourself, well, is it true
that
American labor is more productive? Because if it's a high IQ thing that is America's the perfect place for it, or is it true that we have regulated it to such a degree, and that we have individuals and NGOs and government organizations and all of these other things that have seeped in, and like this is kind of where I think the 1-2 punch is less about tariffs and more about things like DOGE, and recognizing that a lot of the reason isn't some fucking tariff or back and forth thing. It's just getting the government out of these things. The state has a monopsony. They're the only buyer in certain products. Obviously, chips need to be used everywhere, but when the state has a vested interest in military contracting and with and producing military equipment and things that are needed for war, those really crucial things for the defense of the nation, they're the only buyer. So you need not look towards a problem of where the manufacturing is coming from than our own government if those things aren't being purchased or made here.
Shade, go ahead, and then Meese.
Yeah, Fabian, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I do disagree with this kind of libertarian hands-off, government hands-off approach, because it works really well in a void, but it doesn't work when every other country in the world isn't libertarian.
True.
If they...
Luckily, I didn't make that argument, but that's okay.
No, sure, but you can't propose a libertarian model if it's just impossible to begin with. The average tariffs that are imposed on the United States are about 6.5%. The average tariff that America imposes on outside goods is 1.5%. So, some Nonfon, you brought up the retaliatory nature of tariffs earlier. The truth is we're already paying 5x more in tariffs compared to anything that's coming in here. So who's really doing the retaliating here? It's us. We have been on the short end of the stick for decades at this point. So for you to come in and say, oh, well, it's going to result in more tariffs being imposed against us, that has already happened. That ship has sailed a long time ago, and shipbuilding on top of that.
Nonfon, you're shaking your head. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, so for one, my argument there was just that tariffs tend to be more inefficient than other taxes because, unlike other taxes, they cause retaliation. I don't think that is a deniable point, even if you say, we are already being tariffed. But also, we're the one escalating these trade wars right now. Like, you might say that we have a high, other countries have like a higher average tariff on us. But I think that hurts them more than it hurts us, honestly. And I don't think that makes it a net benefit to, respond to them unless you're going to say like there's some game theory that like, by escalating, eventually we could end up with free trade on both sides. I think that could be a net benefit. I don't know how much I trust Trump to do that. But you rejected free trade as good to begin with, so presumably you wouldn't want that.
Well, no, I don't reject that free trade is good to begin with. I think it is just an impossible reality in the real world, which it is.
So I feel like to like wrap everything up, right? Like I feel like all of us recognize that there is a short-term loss to basically everyone when a tariff is implemented. Maybe NewYorkShade disagrees with me, but I don't think he disagrees with me. I think we all recognize that tariffs increase prices. Okay, but the question is twofold, right? It seems like there are two debating points here, right? One is the integrity of our economy secure in a dangerous world where we don't produce enough here because of whatever agreements have already transpired, number one. And I feel like the left even agreed with that. They were like, hey, we were willing to pay $220,000+ per job for a chip factory in Arizona, way above market rate in Taiwan, so that we could produce chips here in the in case something happens. And then the second thing is are we utilizing tariffs as a form of taxation, which Trump seems to talk about when he's selling tariffs, or are we utilizing tariffs as a means of letting people know we're not going to get bent over and fucked in the ass anymore. If you're going to keep fucking tariffing us, we're going to respond in kind, because we don't have free trade when other people tariff us, and then we don't have a retaliatory tariff. Like, what we have instead is a trade deficit that is caused by them engaging in non-free trade while we
just
are.
a question, because I'm not aware, right? And maybe one of you knows the answer to this, but prior to Trump's tariffs on Canada, what was Canada tariffing us on?
I don't know. I don't have that.
I
would hope that someone like Shade, who of course it really hates these retaliatory tariffs, would be able to tell us. What are the goods that Canada's fucking
what's the
us over on?
retaliation? That's the heart of the question. Like, what's the retaliation that Trump's doing with Canada?
It's predominantly eggs, wheat, barley. However, it is implemented at a quota system, so the tariffs do not get implemented until we reach a certain quota of exports. This was agreed to originally under NAFTA in Trump's first term.
Yeah.
I thought that was a bad
Milk,
decision.
cheese, butter, chicken, eggs.
Exactly. Yep. So just kind of exactly. I didn't think that was a good decision on Trump's part, and I think he understands the weight of that decision now. But I do think that Fabian makes a very good point. Right now, we've only discussed tariffs in the sense that it's a protectionist policy that helps spur up industry within our borders. What we haven't discussed is that it's a massive revenue generator for the government that can help offset some of the taxes that are paid today.
It's absolutely not a massive revenue generator.
Well, of course it's a revenue generator. Our importers have to
revenue
pay.
generator, sure, but not a massive one. I mean,
That's
the
like-
revenue
that's like saying
maximizing
a
rate
fucking-
of tariffs is maybe like 40 to
If
50%.
I'm a 10-year-old and I go beat up an 8-year-old for his lunch money, is that a revenue generator, or did I just take money? Right? Like, I don't disagree with you that the bully now has money in his pocket, right? But a tariff is a tax. It's
We're
a
the
form
ones being
of money
bullied.
taken from. But who's paying? Everybody's paying. It's not. It's like the importer that is bringing in imports, right, is paying, and then that cost goes down to the consumers so that they can do that, which means you're paying higher prices, so you're paying, right? Like, everybody
or
is
they make
paying.
less profits.
We pay higher prices in the short run, but over the long run, the production gets within our borders.
Financial
wages
markets already
increase.
coordinate that. Okay, wait, Fabian,
It's
please. I understand we're all socialists.
David
We all
Silver-
hate.
James had been trying to get in, so I want to give
Let
room to
him-
James. Go ahead, James. You had some things to say.
Well, they did the tariffs on the last Trump presidency, and we didn't have inflation, right? So that's just a minor point. But the thing I've been wanting to say is, like, I think Trump seems more focused on Main Street right now than Wall Street. I think he wants the markets to go down. I think he wants there to be uncertainty, on again, off again tariffs. That's going to bring the rates down. Certainly, the real estate guy wants to see mortgage rates come down. Then you get to refinance that $9 trillion in debt. Who's going to buy all that debt? Oh, I guess the Fed is going to need to print money again. So we're going to go back into QE mode. And then everything's going to moon again. So we're going to have this low period. And then stocks are going to come right back up, right? So that's where I think we're headed. But I do wonder, there's one interesting question I want to ask Econoboi is, what's the effect of having tariffs and tax cuts at the same time? Because if tariffs cost me $3,000 a year, and I get $3,000 a year in tax cuts, what does that
Bottom
do?
50% of people just
Like when you do
don't
both at the same
barely
time,
pay income tax.
in your opinion?
Well, I mean, you have all these independently negative effects of the tariffs still, right? You have these allocative inefficiencies, and you have.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have the allocative inefficiencies, right? I mean, it's like what Nonfon said, right? So, like, for instance, if the idea of what Shade is saying, and again, we all kind of, except for Fabian, obviously, we all kind of like generally agree that sometimes it makes sense for the governments to target investment towards certain things that we feel like are strategically necessary, and there might be political goals that we're trying to accomplish as well. Okay, so we've got this thing. We want to invest in like steel manufacturing in this country. Well, what's the best way to do that? And Nonfon's point is that tariffs have all these associated problems when it might be better to charge a much more efficiently sort of allocated tax with a lot less deadweight loss, a lot less allocative inefficiency.
Yeah.
And
But if
then
they
invest that
both
way.
offset each other, then what happens? If they both, let's just say they both offset each other. And, you get as much tax cuts as you're getting tariffs, and those two revenue sources offset each other, right? Then what happens? Does employment increase, right? Do wages go up? Like, does jobs come back to,
Well, no, because your discretionary. If you're talking about like all the trickle down effects, you can net these out in some way. So like, oh, you're paying $3,000 more a year for like all your products, but then you're getting $3,000 a year in tax cuts. again, you're still left with like all the incredible problems of the tariffs as well. Look, I just happen to believe that I just happen to believe that we should tax more and spend more and have more government, more socialism, I guess. But in general, that's my
What's the
disposition.
difference? I am curious. Like, where do you get where do you
tariffs?
Where? And this is kind of what I called out earlier, right? And then you just kind of memed about ANCAPs. But like, what is the substantive? Like, what are the trade-offs of taxing corporations? Like, they're like, why are tariffs especially negative in a way that taxing American business owners isn't?
Yeah, so for instance, number one, I'm not a big fan of the corporate tax. I released an article about that recently, but in general, there's just better and worse forms of taxation. I mean, I think like the tariffs, for instance, it's literally a tax on like the allocative process itself. So, for instance, you might just have like okay, let's say that Oregon produces the best pianos or some shit. Like, the best pianos in the country come from Oregon, right? Well, it would be allocatively inefficient to tax pianos from Oregon, not just because obviously consumers pay it and people end up sort of having this distributed costs, but also because you're telling buyers of pianos, even though the best pianos are the ones from Oregon, you just have to pay more for them. Fuck you. You have to buy these worse Texas pianos, right? Like that wouldn't, obviously, like intuitively, that wouldn't be the best form of taxation, but having broad-based taxation or certain forms of taxation, like if we were to tax pollution or tax land or, having some consumption taxes, generally speaking, that's less allocatively inefficient and raises more revenue. And then you can do a lot more with that revenue as well.
Okay, but if I'm a I'm a corporation, right? Like, I'm a small business and I sell pianos. Okay, that's what I do. I sell pianos in the state of Virginia, and the best pianos are made in Oregon, right? And I have two policies in front of me, right, to choose from. One is going to be a tariff that is going to cost me $3,000 more to buy those pianos, but I'm going to pay $3,000 less in taxes. Okay, so myself as the business in this example, right? The amount of money that it costs me to import the piano goes up by $3,000, but I had $3,000 more in the bank in order to purchase said piano, right? So all of the things being equal, why is it that you're saying, well, there's an incentive, right? And so an incentive towards any taxation changes the behavior, right? So I'm more likely now to buy Texas pianos because I have $3,000 more, and the Texas pianos are, because of this tax, are, they're $2,000 cheaper, right? They used to be $1,000 more expensive, but because of this thing, so like, why is it like you're saying it's more efficient, but you're not making the argument as to why,
because think
one's
about it,
more bad than the other.
Because
I'm just asking you to explain it.
Yeah. Again, there are some forms of taxation that are better for the economy than others. Like, again, I already mentioned that, like a land value tax. Literally, before you could burn all the money from a land value tax, it would just improve the economy. And so that's one thing. Some taxes are just better than others. But then, if you're talking about,
you could burn all of the money by taxing land, and it would be beneficial to the economy.
It would have
that is
beneficial
your argument.
effect.
So you could just steal money out of people
listen,
land
from
rents
people's bank accounts, burn it, and it would be a good thing. What the fuck are you talking about?
Fabian, I could explain why I just said what I said. This isn't a debate on the land value tax. Read about it. It's a really good tax. But anyway, the point is, same thing with like a pollution tax. If you tax pollution away, right, and you didn't do anything with the money, it would still be good for the economy because less pollution's good, right? So land rents are just bad. Now, forget about that. Yeah, you're shaking your head, Shade. Fucking try to explain that one, how pollution's actually good for the economy. Jesus Christ, buddy. Anyway, so what I was trying to say to Fabian's point. What's insane is that pollution's bad for the economy.
What's insane is that there is an arbitrary means by which we determine what is good and bad pollution. For example,
it's not arbitrary.
Lead in the water. No, lead in the water. There is no filtration system on Earth that can make water perfectly lead-free. Okay, there are levels of lead. And so when you implement some tax, some regulation, you have an arbitrary government that comes in that says this is an acceptable level and this is an unacceptable level. So when you say that taxing pollution is just net good, you could destroy the entire economy. You could destroy the entire economy to get rid of pollution, and you still wouldn't get rid of all pollution.
Any research showing what good and bad levels of like lead, for example, would be in like childhood
There's no
development?
such thing as a good level of lead. Any level of lead is toxic. That's why I use it as an example.
This is
Yeah,
this is the most
okay.
reductive, like
He's a
Here,
insane.
last
praxologist,
thing-
okay? The
It's not
empiric-
reductive or
We're-
insane. It's just utilizing your logic and
We're
showcasing
off. We are
why
off.
that's
we
silly.
logically
Okay.
deduced from human action
I
that
do
Anyway,
want to let Econoboi finish his point. Land your
Sorry,
plane,
the
Amelia Earhart,
last
and
thing,
we'll
the
get
only
to
thing
it.
I was going to say was that these things are all else equal, right? So, for instance, if you believed in giving people a $3,000 tax cut,
praxologist.
I mean, just do that,
For-
right? I
for
mean,
lead
fine,
levels.
whatever. There's no reason to make pianos arbitrarily more expensive because you want to protect an industry. It's a less efficient way to protect industry that hurts people. It makes everything more expensive. You don't need to do the tariffs as well. I mean, sure, you can financially compensate for it, but that doesn't mean those negative effects don't exist. I mean, it doesn't mean that we have to, do these in conjunction with each other, essentially, right?
Right,
That's my point.
But my argument is that you can't say that about tariffs and then not utilize that exact same logic towards corporate tax, towards social security tax,
I
towards
can,
any
Fabian,
form of
Because
taxation.
those taxes
Every
are
form of
better
taxation.
forms of
Fabian.
taxation. All forms
Please,
of taxation are not
Fabian.
created equal.
Fabian,
Some forms
please.
of
They
taxation
all
are
have
better,
a negative effect. They
but
all
some
a
have
negative
bigger
effect.
negative
Do you agree?
effects than
They don't.
others.
Okay, let's
Fabian.
get
Do you
back
agree
to
with
the
that?
point at hand. Let's get back to the point at hand. Okay, let's bring it back, rein it in from taxation in general, and let's talk
love
about
taxes.
Trump's. Let's talk about Trump's handling of these things, okay? And let's talk about Trump's appointees and their handling of these things. A few of you mentioned, a couple of you mentioned that there are things that you think that Trump is doing or has done that you believe will have a beneficial effect on the economy. Let's talk about those. Let's give it to Shade first. Favorite thing Trump has done with the economy? Thing you think is going to help the economy the most?
The most, I would say the tax cuts in conjunction with the tariffs to offset the one-time increases in price while we wait for wages to catch up as we move industries onshore is going to be the most phenomenal and needed thing that our country needs. I would also say that deporting about 10 million freeloaders that have leashed off of our economy is also net positive.
Okay, we've talked about the tariffs, I think, a lot. Let's talk about the deportations. What does the other side have to say about that? Let's focus on that for a moment.
Oh God.
Go ahead,
Is
Econoboi.
this
You
even
seem to
a
have something to say.
conversation? Like,
So much to say. So much to say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, in general, I mean, I think we're going to have a very similar line, the three of us. I mean, immigrants, labor and capital, right? The free flow of these things in general is like economically good, but you might have some strategic reasons or some practical reasons why you wouldn't, for instance, have completely free trade or completely free movement of people. And in general, the immigrants that are here have been very productive. America has kind of a unique relationship with immigrants where most of the people who come here, they come here and they work and they're productive people and they provide good services for people. Similarly, like some people will say, these people are just low paid and unproductive workers. It's like, well, should we deport the bottom 20% of people in this country make like $4,500 a year? Like, should we just fucking kill all of them or deport them to Canada or something? Like, no, obviously we need people to do all sorts of labor in this country.
Legal immigrants.
Okay,
We're not
but
talking
even
about
the
legal
illegal,
migrants.
even the illegal immigrants do productive labor and contribute to our society. That's where we would just have a fundamental disagreement.
And they drive down wage for the average American, but I guess
There's
that's
not
a big deal
not
either.
really any good evidence
That's
for
not
that.
true, actually, but you'll reject all evidence we present on that point. I'll predict that in the future.
What's the evidence?
All right, present.
I
One
can
of you
send
two
you-
go take this.
I can send you a paper if you want. There was a study done when Obama, I think, deported immigrants with like the Secure Communities program, and it found that I think it was like when you deported 500,000 legal immigrants or whatever, wages actually fell for native-born workers as well because I mean, immigrants just demand services. They're a positive demand shock, and that can offset their positive supply shock to the to labor supply. And they also just do work like child care and like construction that helps other people work, right? Like businesses are able to more easily expand when there's, cheap construction because of these immigrants. Single mothers are able to go off to work when they're able to hire immigrants to watch their children. Like, yeah.
So
And
are
here's
you
the thing.
for
Here's the thing
the
that Shade
illegal
won't
immigrants
account
to
for.
the table?
Here's the thing that Shade is gonna love. He's gonna love this, and he won't say this is bullshit, right? They also get very little welfare. That's one of the reasons why immigrants
Bullshit.
can be net fiscal positives because they don't qualify
they
for
pay
our
Social
biggest
Security.
buckets of Social Security. Yeah, they don't qualify for Social Security or Medicaid a lot of the time. So.
Well,
Wait,
but they should.
might want
They
to
don't.
make sure that he agrees they don't get Social Security because he might actually think they get Social Security.
Well, I said we'd have
No,
a disagreement on reality. So,
I agree that they
that's
do
what we
not get Social Security.
Okay,
I think-
Shade, you can respond to both of those points. Go ahead.
Yeah, look, I live in Manhattan. I go to work in Midtown every single day. I walk past the Roosevelt Hotel, which hands out $600 credit cards to every single illegal migrant living there every single month. We cover rent. We cover groceries for them. We line them up with jobs that are taken away from the American taxpayer. I immigrated to this country legally. I came from Western Europe. I went through the entire process. I got my visa. I applied for my green card. I got my green card. And I finally got my citizenship after 10 years. So for you to come in and say, okay, well, let's just let however many immigrants we want over the border.
That's what I said.
With that's what happened under Biden.
Is this making a substantial argument, or just saying I did it the right way, so they should too? Are you going to engage with the actual like economic effects that illegal immigrants might have to like lubricate the economy, make things? No, you didn't. You did not.
Yes,
no, you decided an antidote and said, "Well, I live near where a bunch of immigrants
let him finish
get credit
responding.
cards."
Let him finish responding. Please.
Let's see if it's coming. Hopefully, it's coming.
Go ahead. Prove me wrong. Tell me how the illegal migrant
what wrong?
from
I
Nigeria
cited you a paper,
is,
brother. Do you have a paper? Or do you have like?
You haven't said anything about the paper.
All right, Nonfon, don't do the leftist meme of source, right? When you're utilizing empirics to say like
My
before
bad,
and
true.
after effects, as if
You
that's
don't- but
somehow
Nonfon,
like an argument. So
You don't
like,
need
look,
the source. He said
Logically
the reason.
deduce
He said
it for
the
human
things that
action
they
for me.
do,
Right.
Go
the things
ahead.
that they
So
do that are
here's-
lower paid,
here's-
the way that
so
that helps
here's-
the rest of the economy. He said those things.
here's why you're wrong, right?
And it's all
And here's why here's why the lefties here are wrong. And it's something that you see a lot from the left is they kind of switch between the evenly rotating economy or like and a non-evenly rotating economy in the real world when they utilize their examples. So they give all of these reasons why immigrants absolutely open borders is without a doubt, you know, not only is closed borders, in my opinion, as a libertarian, unjustified, right? It is also beneficial to the economy to allow people to come in. The problem is that, again, we have a government that has all of these other things that equates to forced integration. So number one, there is psychic profit issue, right? There are people that don't want certain groups or demographics in their neighborhood, and it's illegal for them to discriminate against them, right? And you can go, oh, well, you just want racism. It's like, no, maybe if I'm in a town like Springfield, Ohio, I don't want 40% of my population to be filled with someone, with a group of people that were bussed in that have an entirely different culture than us. Number two, the government absolutely is paying, or at least was during the Biden administration, to move people, to give them places to live. Where does that money come from? That money comes from people that are working in the economy, people that already are here as American citizens. Their money is being stolen to import labor to prop up, you know, a birth rate decline is really what it is, and a social security system that is failing.
How does this address either Econoboi or Nonfon's points about the
Well, what I'm saying is that their argumentation is as if we have an evenly rotating economy. We don't. We have a player in the economy that engages in non, you know, kind of free trade, if you will, of people by incentivizing with our tax money, bringing people into the market.
But to the claim that they've made, and the specific claim that I can recall off the top of my head, is that wages are not significantly decreased by the presence of immigration.
Right, that's empirics. Right, so that's empirics, right? Like I can tell you the price of potatoes. Yeah, it's
All
wrong.
empirics
It's
is
absolutely
wrong.
wrong.
Don't
So,
you know, Wick?
like you can.
Well, certainly for
no,
low
I just like
skilled
I
labor,
can make an argument, right? That you know, getting rid of 30 million Latinos is going to have a negative impact on the economy. Agreed. I don't think Trump's solution is elegant or correct. I think he's going about this in the worst way possible. But Trump is the only one that actually recognizes in politics right now, for some fucking reason, that it is a problem that we are spending massive amounts of taxpayer funds to engage in forced integration. When people go, again, this is at what cost? There are all these hidden costs. Crime is a hidden cost. Cultural breakdown of institutions is a hidden cost. You know, individuals feeling a part of their community and having a monogamous culture is a part of the cost.
Cultural breakdown of institutions? Can you give me a specific example of that? That immigration.
Schools?
Right. So like I live. There are plenty of neighbor. Well, Haiti, for example, right? And in Springfield, Ohio, what did we see there? And this is something you can kind of track, right? We saw car insurance rates spike. Okay, well, that's like when we're trying to look at economic data, that's something that we just forget about. Well, why did car insurance rates spike? Well, it's because like 1 out of every 550 Haitians has ever driven a car, and then they came over and they had to take a relatively simple test. Then they were given a driver's license, and then they were just wrecking into shit constantly, right? But that's not a calculated cost when we're looking at like when we're trying to track like there's
Fabian,
hidden
why is
costs,
Springfield's
there's
car
unseen
insurance
costs.
rate lower than Ohio's as a state? Why is it lower compared to the state of Ohio then?
I would have to look at that data.
Well,
if
to
it is-
Fabian's point,
that
let me
specific
tell you
one.
right. No,
I saw
let me tell you
the
right. It's
spike.
$114 per month in Springfield and $128 per month in Ohio.
I
on
think
average.
there was
So
actually
why
a
would
paper
that?
Yes, in that
Hall that said
I mean,
like
it would-
immigration
again,
in the short term
again,
does
it's
typically have
empirics, right?
negative
Like I would
effects
have to
on,
like we would have to look at
on
mechanisms,
public education.
right? Like you again, like Paul Krugman can write a fucking data, can win prizes saying actually, price floors don't have a negative effect on minimum wage laws don't have a negative effect on the labor market. But we just know that to be untrue, and yet you can use empiric data to try and prove it as much as you want by looking at before and after. You can't isolate all variables. So the question is
Did you just try to
there
isolate the
is
variable of
do
people coming into the community not knowing how to drive and thus driving up car insurance rates, and then it just wasn't true compared to the state of Ohio? And then also forgetting the fact that Springfield, Ohio was on its last legs economically until these people came in and were the productive labor force in the city. And now it turns out that Springfield, Ohio is becoming more and more successful over time because they now have efficient labor coming into the community.
Well, no, but
the cultural collapse.
It's like
Hold on, Juno, I disagree. Hold on.
I'm just listening to chart go up, and it's so funny.
Because Shade mentioned he only has a problem. Hold on, Shade mentioned he only has a problem with illegal immigrants, Juno, and he's probably fine with Haitian immigrants because those are legal immigrants.
No, they
Juno,
are.
keep that in mind.
They got a phone app, brother. They got a phone
quick
app. They're legal
CB1
now.
app in. Come on.
It was a legal process, Mr. Immigrant.
Yeah,
Okay,
according
you
to
should
Campbell
you should
Harris.
respect
Yeah,
that.
sure.
I thought,
Nobody
Anyway.
actually believes that was a legal process.
Nobody
all I'm
believes it was
saying-
legal.
I'm
All
saying
of
it's,
it was
it's a
legal.
it's a very simple thing that you guys are avoiding, right? Which is you're
Sorry.
citing reasons why these people are beneficial to the economy, and I don't disagree with that. What I'm saying is that it is not a free market of people, that there are programs and incentives to bring people in, and that there are legal protections that keep people
It's
from
like-
being able to engage in capitalism.
Don't
That's the
you think
problem.
you can make data say whatever you want? Like, doesn't everybody kind of know that's true? You can make the data say what you want. Right?
That's bullshit. Sorry, wait. How can I possibly be skewing the data of it is $114 a month for car insurance?
Because you're
in
leaving
Springfield
stuff-
and $128 per month in Ohio as a state. How can
Because
you?
you're
How do we-
referring the
I'm-
wrong you're
I'm not
referring to the wrong
disputing that.
data point. What was the auto insurance before Biden's term within Springfield, Ohio? It's irrelevant what it compares to the state
Right,
of
what
Ohio.
was it?
Auto
You
insurance
gotta compare
goes up
Springfield to
everywhere
Springfield.
anyway. What do you mean?
Well,
Well, look,
compare Springfield to Springfield. What was Springfield 5 years ago? What was Springfield 10 years ago?
Look it up.
Look, to
I mean,
Fabian's
And what was the rate of change for Springfield? Just Springfield. Okay.
Obviously-
only
Well, you have to
Springfield,
compete. You'd have
right?
to compare it to a
And
similar
the same-
town, but
Well, and the same type of driver too. You got to be like a 25-year-old male
guys-
in Springfield
What about
compared to a
this-
25-year-old male in
Okay. Let's.
Springfield. 10 years ago,
Econoboy's
right?
trying to
Like-
get in here. Econoboy, go ahead.
Well,
gotta compare apples to apples.
Nonfon already mentioned that when immigrants come over, they boost demand, right? Which is another way of saying, they might boost some consumer prices, some prices of various things. I don't think anybody here would disagree with that. And I think part of what Fabian said is true as well, that I said they qualify for very little welfare, like sort of formal transfer payments. If you look at just like the total welfare spending that we do, the percentage that goes to illegal immigrants is a very, very, very low percentage. But they do qualify for certain things, public schools and, some other things. It kind of depends on the locality. It's not a costless, transitionless thing when you invite immigrants into a society. But, Fabian's going to know my answer. More socialism, more government programs to help these immigrants. Okay, that's my solution. But the point is, like, it's kind of the same thing. Like, when people lose out because of immigrant labor coming in, these are mostly lower income people. These are people who are oftentimes competing directly with illegal immigrants, which were oftentimes like less educated, very, very low wage workers. These aren't even the manufacturing workers that Shade is talking about. These are very just low income, very sort of high. Like people who live a very precarious life in the first place. And part of the reason they live a very precarious life, again, is because we just don't have a very supportive set of institutions for people in this country,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Yeah, before we get any responses to that, I do need to make a little money, and I did said I'd read these at the top of the hour. We had some technical hiccups, so I extended that a little bit. Gang, if you're enjoying the show, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Keep giving me your money, because that is the most efficient form of taxation is Super Chats. I will spend 100% of the Super Chats you give me, that I receive on things that I want to spend it on, and it will make me happy. And so keep doing that. And I'll read your stuff out loud on stream. So $5 from Testicle Johnson. Thank you for the $5. I appreciate everyone being here today. Even if we don't agree on everything, at least we can all agree that Taiwan rightfully belongs to China. Thank you for the $5. Okay. $5 from Portland is Burning. I'm concerned about the labor market going from a shortage to a surplus as government workers return to the private sector. What are the panel's thoughts on this? It's a good question.
Yeah, generally speaking, I mean, I believe in state capacity and, the government having proper staffing. I mean, one of the misnomers that Elon Musk constantly talks about, I wrote something called the anti-efficiency agenda, which kind of goes into this, which is that, just by cutting employment in these federal agencies, it makes them more efficient, or it cuts the slack. When in reality, anybody who's ever run a business before would tell you that, well, the best thing to do to increase efficiency of certain processes isn't always to just cut all the employment. I use the example of say you go into a department and it's a single person in the department with just papers stacked up because she has to review contracts by hand with a magnifying glass. Would the proper thing to do to cut her salary in half? Would that make her work more efficiently? Probably not. It sounds like she needs, investment, mechanization, IT infrastructure. Yeah, I mean, stuff like that, right? And so similarly, you're not going to make the government more efficient.
You're arguing against a straw man, right? The argument isn't that there aren't ways to make things efficient beyond firing people. The argument is that the United States government is so fucking inefficient, and that there's so many problems.
That culture,
right? Yeah. That there is a much I don't deny, and I don't think Elon would deny in any way, shape, or form that there are means by which you can increase efficiency by spending money. What he's saying is I sent out a fucking email that said, "What'd you do last week?" And there are hordes of people on the payroll that can't accomplish this simple fucking task. So why are we paying them?
On this, and I will jump in just a minute here because I was in the military, and we had EPRs, so enlisted performance reports, right, that we had to do every so often. And gang, that was the most bullshit stuff that you've ever seen. Okay, we literally made I remember writing an EPR and couldn't think of shit, right? And so it was we would make stuff up airman so and so suggested printing using both sides of the paper, saving the Air Force millions of dollars. It's just bullshit, right? So the amount of extra bureaucracy that was added by requiring people to again do this, I don't know. I have real big problems.
Well, that's kind of my point, is that true government efficiency doesn't look like firing all of your government employees or doing these great staffing reductions. When you look at the most efficient governments, and efficiency meaning they do the most with the least, they have the people get calls back from the government's very responsive to people's needs. Those kind of societies have much more people employed by the government, but they also have much more advanced governments in general. They have much better IT infrastructure, much better technology available to them. I mean, for God's sakes, I remember the last time I went to the IRS, I was going into the building. I saw a guy using a fucking DOS computer, like a blue screen DOS computer. That's completely fucking ridiculous. Obviously, if you gave this guy a fucking computer, he could be a lot more productive of an employee, not firing that guy and making the IRS deal with even less employment.
But that's not right. But you're memeing and you're not engaging.
Let's give it to Shade. Shade wants
this is bullshit lies.
Yeah,
that you're just you're creating a narrative.
I don't think. My point is, I don't think that the government is that inefficient that you need to fire fucking half of government departments. Anyway, sorry.
Shade, go ahead.
No, Econoboi, nobody is disagreeing that the tech used within government is extremely archaic and needs massive overhaul to increase those efficiencies.
Investment.
What Musk is arguing, and I would love to hear your answer to this question, is that there is no way that 100% of government employees are actually driving production within the government. Would you say that's true or false?
Well, I would say, okay, it's trivially true that if I had a personal knowledge of every federal... Because every large organization, including private corporations, have bad workers within inside of them. Obviously, there's going to be some government workers. if I could just finish, obviously some government workers are bad, then they probably should be fired. They should probably be reassigned or whatever it is. But that's not what Musk is doing. Musk shut down the entire CFPB, the whole fucking thing. Was every single one of those employees just bullshitting around, not doing anything? I can point to the millions and billions of dollars they've saved taxpayers. What about the IRS where they're trying to do the same thing? What about the education department where they laid off half of the employees just the other day? Like, was half of the education department just bullshitting around? This seems fanciful.
Yes.
I got the response here. I got the
I can
response.
fire 100% of them.
I'm the Elon defender here. I got the response. So I agree he's done too much, but his whole strategy is if you don't bring some back, then you didn't do enough, right? That's his strategy. That's the way he thinks. That's what he's done at Twitter. That's what he's done at all these places. So yeah, he's going to do too much. And then the question is he going to fix the things that break? As long as he fixes the things that break, then okay. If they stay broken, then that's bad. So, like they fired those nuclear workers, right? And then they brought them back right away, right? Or you talk about government efficiency. They were processing retirements in that underground mine. Well, now they're doing them electronically, right? So there are actually real efficiency gains. There are mistakes that are being made and being fixed. And probably, yeah, there's going to be some that are made that aren't getting fixed. And that's...
Hold on, question. Follow-up question on that. Do you think that the harms of stuff breaking and then us having to recover from those harms, do you think those harms are bigger or smaller than the couple $1 million that we save on like $5?
I don't know yet. That's a good question. I don't know yet. It's a good question.
And that was kind of rhetorical because I think it's not even close, and it's not even an actual good question. It's like obviously way worse than even a single fuck up from say like the EPA or this, for example, donor.
I don't know that it's obviously
like
worse.
Like the CFPB, for example, what Econoboi was just saying, like the gains that we can study that we know are true, that we know are come from the government agency. If we don't have those anymore, or even if we don't have a small portion of them, that is already costing Americans way more than firing a couple hundred, a couple thousand workers would, and it's not even close. And it's going to be multiplicative over time. The more we fail, the more people we fire, the more things are going to go wrong. And also, there's a lot of friction in rehiring these people, retraining people. A lot of them won't want to come back. A lot of them will find other jobs.
There was also businesses that didn't get started, though, too, right? There was businesses that didn't get started because of CFPD. So there was lost new economic activity that was never show up in your studies or graphs because it never happened, and now it can't happen. So,
what kinds of businesses?
There's businesses that the CFP shut down before they ever got off the ground, right? So maybe some of those have been good businesses.
Are they like arbitrarily
and we won't really know until we gather the data. Right?
Every regulation and every tax has a downward pressure on business, on whatever it is that it is regulating or whatever it is that it is taxing.
I would say
that
most,
is just a fact of economics. No, without a doubt, it has a downward pressure. You could agree that downward pressure is good, right? You could say, the EPA, as was brought up earlier, taxing or regulating environmental
I regulate upward
dumping
pressure,
of chemicals,
so
right?
I'm going to regulate upward pressure.
Does regulating guns have a downward pressure on their sales?
So
that's a meme.
Right, like you can make regulations that increase growth.
Does regulating guns have a downward pressure on gun violence?
It has a downward. It has obviously it has a downward pressure on those individuals to purchase or buy guns, etc. Right now, of course, there are unintended consequences to every action that you have. Right, such as having gun regulations that make it difficult for people that don't actually have criminal records but can't pass a criminal background check because they have a similar name to someone, but criminals that don't give a fuck about those regulations that use a black market to get guns. So things like criminal background checks have been shown to be disproportionately abusive towards people that are non-violent, non-criminals from being able to defend themselves. Right? They're always unintended
this to be a gun
consequences.
control conversation.
It was a snarky thing. I apologize. I didn't mean to disrail. I do have more super chats that I need to get to.
I'm just saying, but at the onset, it doesn't matter what it is you're doing. If you're taxing something or if you're regulating something, you're taking money out of the market, out of economic growth in general, right? So there's a negative there. And then you have some downward pressure on what it is. Now, people like Econoboi's argument would obviously be that the return on investment or that whatever it is that you're doing has a positive end in the end. But if you're gonna just sit here and be like these things good always, Like it's silly.
Who said
Like
that?
No one.
it always comes with a negative.
Who said Fabian? Who said
Wasn't
that?
my argument.
You said that it was obvious, and that it was just true at the face that any disruption of
Was I
government
saying
in terms of hiring.
all regulation is obviously good? Did I say that, or did I say that the couple $1 million that we'll save from firing, for example, the CFPB workers, is obviously less important than the billions that we can study that they save the American taxpayer every year? Wait, I think that's the obvious point. Not
That's
that every
neither of
single
those.
regulation is
Hold on.
obviously good. I disagree
Neither of those arguments are a one-to-one. What you're doing now is a goalpost shift. What you were saying before was not specifically CFPD. What you were saying is
I
any
did cite that by name,
any
actually.
places.
Yeah.
Any places where the Elon Musk overfires and then has to hire
I didn't
people
say any
would
places.
obviously. Yes, you fucking did.
Actually, no, I will defend that because it absolutely is. Like, even just the friction alone of like trying to find these people back, trying to retrain people that then went on to private sector jobs, went on out of the country, retired, whatever it might be. Even that cost alone is probably nearing the level of like what you would pay them in the first place, because you have to go recruit those people, you have to train those people, you have to find them. And so, yeah, absolutely. Like, I think like you're already even just fixing the thing that you broke.
We gotta
move
on. We gotta move on.
Yeah,
Real quick, could I
Make more
respond
money.
to this actual super chat? Okay, the U.S. labor market is tight. It's not going to get much looser, even if all 3 million federal workers were fired. You don't have to worry. It's going to be tight for a while. Anyway,
Cool. $5 from Mr. Everything. Thank you for the $5. Why would tariffs bring jobs back when it's easier to pass the cost off to consumers and keep low wages overseas? That's to you, Shade, I believe.
Sorry, I zoned out there. The question was why
would tariffs bring jobs back when it's easier for a company to pass the cost off to consumers and then just keep the low wages overseas?
Because tariffs reduce demand for overseas goods.
Okay. $10 from Psychonaut. Can we not raise the taxes on assets and capital gains, not the corporate tax rate? Question mark.
I mean, you could.
The argument's the same.
Obviously, you could. I mean,
there are
again,
more
baked
efficient
into-
taxes.
There are more efficient taxes, yes.
Alexander Rin for $10. How many of you know how many nuclear engineers or Ebola support workers came back after being fired? Does anyone think their work ethic is better now than it was then? That's a good
Yeah, I don't
question.
know.
How
I mean-
many came back?
Is it a good
100%?
question? I don't fucking know.
Yes, it is a good question because it's yet another thing you pile on top of. Okay, you fired them. Now you have to fix the problem. You have to hire them back. You have to retrain the people that aren't going to come back, and then also you have to,
Yeah,
help
but how
them
many came
understand-
back? Does anyone know?
No.
It's a valid question.
Yeah,
But-
Juno, out of all the people that have been fired, what percent have had to get rehired?
Nobody knows that question on the top of their head. If you do, I'll be very impressed. But what I'm saying is there's extra costs even on top of that, even if you do get them back, even if you get them back on the programs that are important that they stopped working on. Now they're going to be like, okay, am I going to get fired tomorrow again? Am I going to get replaced? Am I going to get replaced by AI? Like, these are the kinds of things that they are now thinking. And so, of course, the work ethic is going to be lower. It's just like obvious, like human psychology, that after you get fired and hired back, you're going to be like, okay, well, I don't know if my job is safe anymore. So there are also people who didn't get fired the first time are going to start looking for jobs elsewhere too, because now they think their jobs are unsafe. So it trickles across the entire like government.
Look, there's no argument
Give me a
for
second.
me, right, that sometimes when a government attempts to fix its inefficiencies, it turns out worse and just wasting money in the attempt to do so, right? I think the classic example of this was when Tennessee made it to where people couldn't get welfare, TANF, food stamps, etc., unless they passed drug tests, because there was like a bunch of Republicans that were just convinced that like 60, 70, 80% of these people were on drugs and they were going to save all this money. And it turned out an incredibly small portion of them were actually on drugs, and that they spent more money drug testing the people and bringing people in for drug tests to try and weed out the people that were on drugs than if they had just left alone as it was, right? So they were trying to correct that inefficiency, right? The thing that what I'm saying is, and I think is really silly, that there's this like marriage to like the government. How dare you touch our beautiful government? And like the left will admit that there's inefficiencies and corruption in the government, but the moment somebody comes in with a sledgehammer, they're like, whoa, you got to do it with a scalpel. You got to be real nice and slow. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's better to go in with a scalpel, except the problem is that this corrupt, fraudulent, wasteful disgusting state has been a bloated corpse rolling downhill for 60 years or longer, and Trump was elected to be a bull in a china shop. So that's what he's doing, and that's what Elon is doing. And there's going to be losses, but the idea that you can assume that it is an automatic gain, or sorry, an automatic loss overall, is just, I think it's just, that's just your belief, and then you're using ideas and things to prop up your belief,
So
not
wait,
making a real argument.
before you
we've
respond,
given
just
you
before you
reasons
respond, just before
why.
you respond, and
Yeah.
I'll give you a chance in a second. Alexander Rin has a follow-up. He says that that's not the point. The point is the harm that's been caused to the people working there, and the kids of institutive knowledge, and the loss of institutive knowledge. Firing the wrong people is absolutely a big effing deal. Thank you for the clarification.
Worked out for Twitter.
Fabian, I
Did
think
it?
Fabian, I think the problem with what you're saying is we did actually give you the reasons why it would be a big cost. Like I've said them now 3 times, and you just
That's
don't
not
engage
what
with
I'm
them.
saying.
But then, but
No,
all
I've
you're saying,
engaged with them.
No, stop. What I'm saying is you are mischaracterizing what we believe. We do agree that it should be a scalpel, but also we believe that there are tons of government agencies that are currently being cut that are going to have massive costs for like American consumers and the workforce in general, right? Like even if they need to hire them back, and we give you reasons why it's going to have high cost to hire them back, even maybe up into the amount you're saving to fire them in the first place. And so you're not actually cutting a massive portion of government spending here. You are just making the government spending we do
Okay,
less
I
efficient
do
and
have
less
to. I
productive.
do have to address something.
Yeah, those are
Shade
two
said.
different arguments,
I know
and
he did
you're
it off.
playing
Stop,
back and
stop.
forth
Because
dance.
hold on. Before we get off on that tangent, Shade made a comment that I absolutely want to interrogate for a moment. You said that Twitter is better now. Is that your claim? Can
That
you
is correct.
elaborate?
When Elon Musk acquired Twitter, what was it, 2 years ago, he immediately reduced the workforce by 80%, leaving 20% of the original employees.
Sure.
As a direct result, the valuation of Twitter has tanked in the short term. But as it became more and more efficient over time, as it continued to get users relying on the same tech, what was it? Just a month ago, Elon Musk is now fundraising for par value on the valuation that he ultimately acquired it for 2 years ago. So the question is, and Juno is referring to this, sure, are there going to be some short-term pains for making mistakes, cutting the wrong people, and then having to rehire them? Absolutely. But what are the long-term benefits? We saw this turnaround with Twitter in just 2 years. So the question is, what are the long-term effects? And what Juno can't answer is, okay, out of all the people fired, what percent are actually getting rehired? And he's not addressing that because we don't, that quantifies the impact. And the impact is not nearly to the level that Juno is describing.
Because we don't know yet.
Real quick,
It's
been
less than 3
just
months.
to let
We don't
everyone
know.
And
know.
why are you
We
making
don't
this
know
long
yet.
on it?
We don't know yet. We don't know
let me
yet.
fucking
You
finish.
fucking pussy.
Let me
We
finish.
knew when it was on your
Elon?
side, but now we don't know when it's other
Okay.
data. Shut
Elon
up.
Musk, when he acquired Twitter in October of 2022, Twitter was valued at $44 billion.
Correct.
Fidelity has now valued it today at $9.4 billion.
No. The debt
Revenue is down. Revenue is down, but profit is up.
Yeah,
That's
right.
exactly
They weren't
what we
profitable
fucking want with
before,
government.
Valuation.
and now they're profitable. They were going
no,
to
but
go
they-
bankrupt, and now they're not.
and the
So
debt.
that's
That's
success.
exactly what we want for the government.
and
Spending
that's a
less
success.
money and then being profitable. Like that's exactly what you want for the government.
Shade and Fabian are ignoring the like political incentives here to invest in whatever Elon does. Do people think Tesla suddenly became like X% more profitable the day after Trump got elected? Of course not. They didn't fundamentally change their product or anything. It's just the fact that he has more political and social power now, and that's the reason
That's
why
nothing to do with
people are investing more into Elon's thing.
hold
So
on.
if
That
he's
has
raising at a
nothing
valuation of
to do with
$44
it.
billion, it's not because it's like it's necessarily more profitable or a better
The
product
debt
or
is
whatever
trading
than
at
it
par
was.
value today. The debt is
Look,
is getting traded at par value today from the debt that was used to acquire Twitter originally. So the markets do not agree with you whatsoever. You're hallucinating.
Listen, to Shade's point, okay, I agree. I'm not surprised a private capitalist company like Twitter was run extremely inefficiently, okay? But when it comes to the people's government, okay, the people's
It was about
government.
the woke people. The woke were running it,
yeah,
right?
the
Let's
DEI
get it straight.
government. No, when it comes to the government, though, I think there's reason to say that what Fabian is saying is wrong and what Juno is saying is right, is that we kind of know that this will be very unproductive and inefficient because, look, there's already the Office of the Inspector Generals, there's the GAO, there's already organizations that are literally entirely dedicated to rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse in the government, and they do find some fraud, waste, and abuse in the government. And there's been conservative administrations before, there have been Democratic administrations before who have very, very forensically investigated investigated the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse in government programs. And what they find over and over and over and over again is that there's some level of fraud, but it's very, very low. It's not 50%. It's not entire departments, okay? And that's why I think this is, we have good reason to
billion a year.
One dude on Twitter, Mike Benz. That's my whole argument. Like the idea that the Office of the Inspector General is like somehow this like fucking organization that is just running perfectly and things are great and it's all maybe it needs a little bit more.
You said
money.
we straw man, but then you keep straw manning.
I don't.
No, you're making this
do,
position.
Fabian.
I've actually been in the military and I've actually gone to the OIG before. So thank you. But regardless, because of soldiers that were not being taken care of after their PDHRA assessments when they got back from Afghanistan and a doctor was mistreating them. So anyways, setting that aside.
Why are we cutting the ACE stuff?
What I'm saying is that there is one guy on Twitter can show just massive amounts of State Department and NGOs and CIA fronts and all of these other things that are connected with USAID. That's why they started with USAID. That's why it was such a big deal, and that's why so many people were so fucking pissed because their kiddie funds that they're funneling over into politics and our corrupt government was under attack. This idea that like, oh, DOGE somehow bad because we already have something that does that job. Well, it wasn't fucking working, and it hasn't been working for a long time, and that's why people fed up voted for a populist that said he wants to bring a sledgehammer to the fucking system. Like, and that's why you yourself multiple times, Econoboi, have lambasted the Democrats for not propping up people like Bernie Sanders for the very same fucking reasons.
Bernie Sanders would not have gotten elected for the reason of he would destroy the federal government's entire state capacity. I don't think he ever ran on such a thing, Fabian.
That's not what I said either. What I said
Fabian,
is that it was a populist that would come in and that would shake things up because the system itself is corrupt.
Right,
it's the same very shit
Fabian, the idea that it's hypocritical for me to support a left-wing populist but not a right-wing populist that doesn't even logically follow. You can't possibly.
That's not what I said. Are you ever going to fucking address a
Fabian,
single fucking
you
argument
literally
I make,
said,
"Oh well,
Econoboi." No, let me restate your argument. I want everyone here to say if I restate this right. What he just said was, "Quote." Well, Econoboi, in the past, you've lambasted the Democratic Party for not being populist and not being this bull in a china shop like Trump, which is implying. Shouldn't you kind of like or approve of what Trump is doing? I mean,
if that's what you deduce from it, and then make an argument from your own deduction.
Everyone here,
argument.
Raise your hand if that's an unfair deduction. Was that an unfair deduction of what I just made from Fabian's argument? Did I miss? Okay,
we got the deduction and then made the argument from the deduction.
You got a maybe from James. I'm sure Shade is too cowardly to agree with me, and then obviously my two lefties agree with me. Wick, do you agree with me? Was that a fair deduction?
I'm going to be real with you. I was not
He's staying out of it.
But keep
That's
going.
okay.
Yeah,
okay. You're the moderator. Understandable.
No, again, I'll have to re-clarify my argument, which has been half of my speaking time in this entire debate, is me having to restate what I already said so that you can hopefully engage with it.
If
my
say
argument
that
both populist candidates talk about how the system and the institutions are corrupt and how they benefit large corporations and the rich and people that have money, and that they don't benefit the average American worker, and that you yourself have talked about how this populist messaging and large progressive social programs and large sweeping changes to government are needed in order to make it better. What I'm saying is that citing the OIG as like a reason that DOGE doesn't need to exist is counterintuitive when you recognize that these institutions are corrupt and that they're not working for the American people.
Let me just ask you directly. Do you think that Bernie Sanders would have gutted USAID?
Probably not, but I'm
okay.
Bernie would have made
substantively different ways in which these two candidates.
If I trusted,
let me finish my point, please, before you interrupt. Right, so you can understand what I'm saying. Right, is so when you make the argument that Bernie Sanders and Trump would have been elected in order to make big changes, fair. But then the question becomes, what big changes would Bernie Sanders have made compared to Trump? How are they different? And how does that apply to the argument at hand? I think that the USAID, which, let me finish, the USAID situation, which is why we are discussing this and why this topic this point even came up, the context in which the discussion is being had, it is clear to me, almost and certainly, that Bernie Sanders would not have touched USAID in any meaningful
the
way.
reason I say he wouldn't touch USAID is because I don't trust him to be an honest actor. But if I was to assume that the same Bernie Sanders, that same energy that was on Congress and then the Senate floor for 20 years straight, saying, hey, look at this office building in like the Isle of Man that has 70 corporations in it, and here's a picture of their phone, and was showing people that, if that same energy and that same anti-corruption Bernie Sanders was elected, I absolutely think that he would have gutted USAID for it being a tool of the CIA and the State Department as a means of pushing forward the interests of the state, and would have taken a fucking sledgehammer to these programs. But no, the current Bernie Sanders, I don't think that he would have gone after USAID, because I don't think that he would go after that giant corporate fucking state cathedral money thing for himself. But if I were to trust him and the old populist that he claims to be, he absolutely would have fucking gutted USAID. Like, there's no question about it.
How about he would have got rid of private health insurance, right? He would just say, nope, no more private health insurance. That was actually, in the original single-player plans, right?
That's actual government efficiency right there,
but
James.
like that's
So he just would have destroyed those, and I kind of maybe agree with that, but he probably would have tried to do that, right? He probably would have said,
Yeah,
let's just
probably,
Yeah,
but I mean, like,
sure, but that's
the
not-
like types of like
That's
anti-corruption
relevant
another
to my
difference.
argument.
Hold on, if I
entirely
may.
different.
That's
Like,
another difference is Trump probably won't do that. I'm almost certainly he's not
No
going
shit.
to make that change. Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
nobody
Okay,
said
we can
Trump
see that
and Bernie
they're
are the
while they
same
may be
person.
populists.
I'm waiting for Fabian to have a smallest amount of like political understanding and calculus on why they are targeting the things that they're targeting. USAID was targeted first, not because it was the most corrupt, the most CIA influence. It's because it is the easiest political target, because the American people don't give a shit about foreign aid. It's not in their top 10 issues that they care about. It's only the terminally online, most educated people like us that care about it. And so that's the easiest target to just completely gut, and no one will care because they can get away with it. And they can then post on their Twitter accounts, tell all the like right-wing people, look at all these like random trans programs in Bolivia or whatever the fuck that we're cutting, and all the like slop eater right-wing people will eat it up because they just see, $1 million
Are you saying
saved.
we should keep
And so-
those?
Yeah,
most of
I
them,
think
yeah,
anybody
absolutely.
that does, I think
Yeah.
anybody that does a univariate analysis like you're doing is silly. But like, I don't necessarily disagree that obviously had an impact. Like, they're fucking Republican politicians, and Elon Musk can claim he's not a politician, but he's acting like one. So of
If
course
the
they
goal is
targeted a
to
program
save
that was
money-
easy to showcase some of the most absurdities, right? Like,
If
it's
the
a
goal
lot
was to
easier.
save money, they would target Social Security, Medicare, and the military, but they're not doing those right now. I mean, they're kind of
been
trying
50
Social Security,
days.
but they're not actually.
Right,
days.
but you also have to recognize that you yourself recognize that the idea of cutting cutting government spending has to be sold to the American public. And then you gave a reason why this is the easiest thing to sell to the American public, right? Because $200,000
Not because
to
it's
teach
not
people
important.
to teach people in the Middle East about piss art and like random dumb shit.
Yes,
And like
because-
most Americans will be like, this
No,
is dumb,
no.
right? But you also yourself admit that they do plan to target Social Security. I mean, Hassan just got fucking banned because he got freaked out about it, right? And that they do plan on targeting defense spending.
Hassan
And that
get
they
banned?
do plan on targeting these other
For a
places.
day.
He means the Rick.
Oh,
day.
for the day he got
Yeah,
banned.
yeah, he
Okay,
means the Rick
whatever.
Scott.
Right, like you
I-
making
I-
my
I-
argument
I-
for
I-
me and then
there.
acting like it's defeating me.
Fabian, yes, no. I think it does, because the percent of what you are targeting when you got like the education department, USAID, whatever it is so minuscule compared to the actual big task at hand.
That's a-
Of if you
that's a
if you
bad
care
argument.
about
Yeah,
military
I'm a fucking
spending.
anarchist. Let's abolish
I
Social
do want to
Security,
get other
Medicare,
people
Medicaid.
in the
Yes,
discussion.
awesome.
I do want to
He's
get
not gonna.
other people in the discussion. I know Shade has some stuff to say. I have another super chat, and I want to get Nonfon in here too. So Shade, super chat, Nonfon, go ahead.
It's Juno's position of they're not focusing on the right things is just absurdly hilarious, considering we're 50 days into this administration. We've cut down 83% of USAID, and they've definitively told us that they're going for the Defense Department, they're going for Social Security, they're going for Medicare next. So like it's just a non-argument. It's laid out for us. It's going to happen. You can't do it all at once. This is a
I
step-by-step
don't know if
process.
it's gonna happen.
Should
Shade,
we
do you
raise
want to?
taxes
Shade,
to-
I have a wager. I have a wager for Shade. Shade, are you willing to bet whether or not the defense budget goes up or down under Trump?
I think net it will go up.
But you said they were going to go after the defense spending. What do you mean by that then?
The defense spending typically increases year over year. It's about diminishing the margin in between.
So Okay, so you're saying they're going to decrease the rate of inflation of defense spending? That's how they're going to find all these efficiencies in the... well, okay. I don't know. I disagree with that. I think it's going to go up by much more than inflation, if I had to guess. But
Well, no, what he's
It's gonna
saying,
go up by
hold on,
multiple
just to
factors
steel
of
man
the
him, because I
entire
don't think he's
USAID
saying that.
budget.
Hold on, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but what he's saying, instead of going up by 10%, for example,
Exactly.
it will go up by 5% instead.
Yeah, but the government, the defense budget is not mandatory spending, right? So there's not like a regular set of increase that the defense department gets, right? It's not like Social Security or Medicare or things like that,
I
right?
mean,
And
some
so
of it is.
And
Kinda.
it happens every year under both sides of administration.
yeah,
I
I,
mean,
think
like, I
think
agree with you,
some
but
are.
like, we have certain commitments that require spending in order to meet those.
Of
Commitments.
course,
But,
yeah, like there's
it's
some
not an entitlement. Yeah.
benefits and disability payments and stuff, of course. But like in general, though, obviously the government could just, I mean, they could cut those things as well. I mean, it's kind of an arbitrary distinction, and so I don't think it's. Number one, Trump has at the very least said he's not going to cut Social Security and Medicare, which I am suspect about that.
God, I
You
wish
said
you
they're
would.
gonna. You said they're gonna go after Medicare. What do you mean by go after? I guess I just assumed you meant cut these things.
The inefficiencies within the administrative bureaucracies that are administering Social Security and Medicare. They're not cutting Social Security and Medicare.
All right. I disagree. I don't think Social Security is a pretty. These are all very efficient things. I think that's kind of the fundamental thing that I mentioned. Well, you said okay, but you refuse to engage in any of the actual publications on all these things. Like, I just don't
You have no
understand.
proof
Like,
that it's
do you
efficient.
think? Hold on, Shade. Do
We
you
can
think when?
cite-
Do you think when? Hold on, really quick. Do you think when Reagan's administration investigated this? Do you think when Bush Senior administrations investigated this? Do you think when Bush Junior investigated this? Do you think when Trump the first time looked into all these? Are they all just fucking? Are they all just dumb fucks, including Trump the first time around, and they just didn't realize we were wasting half of the government's money? Like, no, like the truth is we're just not wasting a lot of this money, right? Like that's kind of the fundamental point that you guys haven't really contended with in a very substantive way.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll contend with that since you asked.
Well, let
right?
Shade
First and
respond. Shade
foremost-
was addressed. Let
No,
Shade
no,
respond.
Go ahead,
Go
Fabian.
ahead.
Go ahead, Fabian.
Of course, I'll float it
yeah.
to Fabian. Fabian, please
course.
respond to the point I made to Shade.
It's
Right, let's-
ridiculous, Brent.
Well, you said
it's-
you
it's
guys
very
multiple
ridiculous.
times, but if Shade
Well, I
wants
was
to
talking.
respond, he can,
I'd
but he
love
can
for
pass it
you. You're probably better than Shade, so give me a good faith response to what I just said.
Right. So setting aside libertarian theory on the fact and social consequences of Social Security as a waste to take, and anyways, setting aside the fact that that money would be far better in people's hands, setting aside that the institution itself is based around stealing money from people and not getting returns that they would get themselves. Setting all that aside, right? Absolutely were many of those presidents dumb. I think fucking absolutely is the government become a leviathan that has grown over and over again, that has been a difficult thing for any president to be able to gain control of. When we look at Trump and his first administration, there are two things to consider. One, Trump was obviously, his political acumen was not as high as politicians. He went in with some of the dumbest ideas, right? For Christ's sake, he had neocons advising him on Iran, and it wasn't until he saw fucking Tucker Carlson that he realized that Mr. Walrus Mustache was probably a bad guy to have around. Secondly, we saw multiple times in which his own people committed treason and nothing happened because he didn't have the power to go after people that committed treason against him, such as when he ordered troop withdrawals from Syria, and then they just lied to him, said that they did the troop withdrawals, and then they just didn't do it, and then they went on CNN and bragged about how they stopped Trump from removing the 2,000 soldiers down to 800 soldiers because he just didn't understand what was going on, and like we just defied the the commander in chief. And then third of all, Trump was under massive lawfare, he was under not one but two different impeachment proceedings. You had lawyers and operatives within the state that were going after his own cabinet members before he even took office. You had the FBI the idea that he wasn't shackled by the state institution itself is hilarious. I think Trump is coming in now with a lot more political acumen, a lot more knowledge, and with a lot more people that he trusts.
Maybe a good thing, perhaps, because you're look, I think it's a good thing that our executive branch be shackled, as you say, by other branches of the government. I think that's a good thing. I think that's positive. I want that to happen.
Some of the
I would like
examples I
Congress
gave
to be
were his
shackled
own.
by some of the other,
Right.
like the judiciary. I want the executive to be shackled, right, by Congress, right? That's good. I want that.
Right, describing
else-
checks and balances is not the same thing as people within the executive committing treason. Number one, it's not the same thing as the executive constantly, investigating Trump instead of working under him as they're supposed to. And it's also not the same thing as a level of lawfare that was over the most petty and stupid things that were designed to grind the state, to a halt to keep him from being able to clean up a corrupt government. Now, obviously, I think Trump is corrupt in many other ways, and I don't fucking like the guy in a lot of other ways. And I think he was dumb in his first presidency, as I stated, right? But yes, I absolutely agree with the argument that plenty of people that have attempted to investigate the entire state apparatus have been both dumb and have lacked the power or the acumen or the actual care or cause for concern to actually clean up our corrupt government. I think most of the people you listed are corrupt politicians.
And just
Okay,
piggybacking off that, Social Security and Medicare are also sacred cows, right? Going after them is hugely unpopular historically with the electorate, and Trump has campaigned on this. He got voted into the office for cutting the bloat and the waste and the fraud around these departments, particularly not Social Security and Medicare in itself, but the bloat of the administrative process of getting those payments out is what he campaigned on. On top of that, he's not going for re-election here. He doesn't worry about attacking these sacred or diving into these sacred cows because there's no downside. There's nothing to lose for him. And on top of that, he got voted into office to do just that. So I agree that a lot of these presidents that have committed to this in the past, some of them were just dumb, but a lot of it also had to do with the political capital where it's just hugely unpopular to go after these.
He didn't campaign on this. To be clear, he did not campaign on this.
Yes, he
said
did.
Won't.
Yes,
No. He explicitly said he would not cut Social Security.
Hold on.
Because he knew it's a political loser.
Hold on. He never said
Just
he's
lying.
cutting Social Security. He's cutting the bloat around it in the administrative bureaucracy. And there's a huge difference that liberals love to conflate to say, hey, Trump is actually going after Social Security. You're not going to get your Social Security payments anymore. That is complete derangement. It is not what he campaigned on. He campaigned on cutting the bloat of the administrative process that is getting these payments out to the people.
He campaigned on protecting it.
He campaigned on protecting it, and he explicitly said he was not going to cut it. Which, even if you believe it's not going to, those cuts won't lead. Hold on. Even if you think those cuts won't lead to the people on the ground not getting payments, even if it's just the bloat that they're cutting, he said he will not cut it. Period. And so, the reason why,
you're being fucking
Hold on, let him
retarded
finish.
now.
Let him finish.
Idiot.
Look,
No, idiot,
this is
relax.
dumb.
Let him finish.
I know
Juno,
it's
go
5 minutes,
ahead,
but let me finish.
uninterrupted, please.
Okay, yes. Even if it is the case that it's cutting the bloat, that's not what the American people hear. And you yourself said it's politically unpopular. When they hear, I'm going to cut Social Security, even just the bloat, and you're still going to get your payments, they don't believe you because they don't believe that the cuts themselves won't trickle down to them. And that's why it's the third rail of politics. And that's why he was unwilling to say even any cuts at all, even the bloat, he's not going to do because it's politically unpopular. And that's why he lied about it during the election. And now they're going to try to do it because now he doesn't need to win another election. As you said, it's going to be incredibly politically unpopular. And that's the reason they're going after the easier targets first that don't make a difference on the budget almost at all, and save the actually hard challenges for either later or not at all.
And
don't wanna
that's why
strawman.
the GOP popularity is at 70% approval rating right now because
That's
Trump
false.
really swindled them completely. Absolutely.
That's a lie.
it.
That's a lie.
That is not a lie.
Okay. Wait,
I don't
real
want to.
quick.
I don't want to
Yeah,
straw man you.
70%
I really want to know. Is your
Well,
argument?
I'll let you go in a
Wait, can
second,
you
but I
link
want
that? Can you link
Nonfon
it,
to get
please?
in. I want to give Nonfon a chance. He's been waiting
Yeah,
a little
okay.
bit.
Can you
I mean,
link it? Can you link
we
it
can't
first,
trust
please?
any of these reports that have come out. They're too shackled by the deep state or whatever. Real quick,
Yeah,
what
no,
percent of Social Security spending do you think is waste, fraud, or abuse? Fabian and Shade and whoever else
100%.
answer. Okay, setting
100%
aside
of
the
all Social
libertarian
Security is
philosophy, taxes is theft, please.
How much money do you think is not fraud, waste, or abuse?
Answer the
And
99
Social
plus
Security,
percent.
90, yeah.
Like
Well, I
almost
think-
all of it.
I think that the GAO said there was up to $500 billion a year in waste, fraud, and abuse. So
Which
that's
is
what the
what percent?
GAO said.
That's not from Social Security, just to be clear, right?
Well,
And
I know,
again, if
that's
we-
all things. That's all things. I'm not saying that. In general, I would say the percentage is maybe 10 to 20% if we're being charitable. But I understand a lot of things aren't that high. But you got the GAO saying there's 500 billion in it.
Well, you have to
500 billion-ish in abuse.
deconstruct that, right? Like what they'll say is like, okay, take Medicare for example, or Medicaid, I should
I
say.
know.
They'll say Oh yeah, the waste abuse rate of Medicaid is 5%. 5% of the money we spend on Medicaid is waste. That's like $50 billion a year. But what a lot of that is improper payments on account of like people missing. Of the 20 pieces of paperwork you have to submit, you have like 19 of them, and they'll count that
Make
as
it
an
more efficient. Yes.
improper payment. Well, right, but James, that's
Yeah.
kind of our entire point, is that's not really what Trump is actually doing. He's not actually like, if you were going to design an efficient welfare system that eliminates the waste, fraud, and abuse, what you would do is, as Fabian would put it, more socialism. You'd make it cash based. You'd make it more universal. You would do stuff like that, because then there's
Understand.
necessarily less improper payments. But again, Trump is just not doing any of that stuff. He's saying the way to get rid of the waste in Medicaid is just like firing 20% of the people who work for Medicaid. These things just don't logically follow.
You can take the best case scenario of what you just said and cut 10 to 20%, and it's still we'd still have an increasing deficit and debt every single year, and it would not matter. And so, like, even if which
Right.
is not
So
true, by
we
the
need
way, that's
growth.
10,
You got to have growth too. If you
No,
don't have growth
James.
with that,
What we
you're not gonna
need,
get there.
we need more stealing from people in the form of taxation. That's what we need to solve our deficit problem.
Okay,
Hey,
I do have
Growth
some
is our
super chat-
savior, man.
Yeah,
You
I
know
do want to
this.
have some super chats I want to get to. And Fabian, you're added in one of them, so you're gonna get to talk. Okay, don't worry. This is one to Fabian, actually, the first one. $10 from Alexander Rin. At Fabian, what fraud has Elon found that wasn't already known about by people in the government? Also, USAID had the money they used public on their site along with where it went.
Hold on 1 second. Let me just.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So if you want every single solitary, let me just find it real quick. Hold on.
He said fraud, not waste, by the way. So the Doge stuff does
Right.
not count.
Yeah. So just go to doge.gov, right? And just
Fraud,
link
not
that in your
waste.
Chat.
These are different, right? Do you agree these are different, fraud and waste?
No, I'm saying every single fucking receipt is there if you want to look for it, or if you want to look for things that you found. Now,
That's what
obviously,
they're considering waste, not fraud. These are different, right?
Why does that matter in this context?
Because this guy
It
asked,
has to.
can you point out fraud? Can you point out fraud? And what
Okay, sure,
Doge
fine.
claims
fraud,
to be
what-
waste.
fraud is a
is
fraud
not
is a
fraud.
legal claim. It's not the purview of Doge to be able to adjudicate what is or isn't fraud. What they can
But
do
they-
is they can say this
they are,
they can
according
do
to
this prog. No, they're not. They're
Let
fraud,
him
waste,
finish.
and
Then
Let,
why are
abuse.
you
let
linking
Fabian.
the Doge
Hold on.
website?
Hold on.
This
Let
is-
Fabian
Okay,
finish.
all right.
Just go ahead, Fabian. Please.
This is the same thing when you're like, Trump didn't campaign on any cuts to Social Security in any way, shape, or form, even if he campaigned on Doge getting rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. Even if he finds fraud, waste, and abuse, that's actually against it. Like, this is like the most actually Reddit gay shit ever, dude. Like, fraud, waste, and abuse is just a term that people have used for like 60 years in the government when they're talking about things that we
Just real
shouldn't
quick.
be spending
Thank
money
you for the
on.
raid, Aquamoose, on Kick of all things. I almost never check my Kick, but thank you for being here, gang. Okay, sorry. Welcome, Aquamoosers. I don't even know. Continue, please, Fabian. My bad.
I'm saying it's not his purview to investigate fraud and then make a legal claim about fraud occurring, right? It is his purview to say there are inefficiencies, there are departments where money's missing, there are places where like the return on investment is terrible, and then he gives that to Trump, and then if there are things that look like they could potentially be fraud, that goes to the DOJ or other organizations depending upon like what, it can get complicated depending upon like where he's finding it. But nevertheless, the
not what they're doing,
idea that you need a smoking gun on fraud is just a complete distraction from the actual fucking conversation. Like, the conversation is that it's his
subjective
job to
opinion
find all
on-
these inefficiencies.
A subjective opinion on what is and is not efficient is not fraud. Fraud has, as you said,
It's waste.
a legal definition, and even if you don't want to use the legal definition, it's still pretty clear what fraud is. It's if you're like paying people to not do literally anything, for example. But for example, a lot of the things on USAID, when you're
Like
paying
streamers.
people to run actual programs, even if you disagreed with what those programs were about, that is not fraud. You can claim it's waste, and you can claim you disagree with the
absolutely-
purpose of it, but it's not fraudulent.
It absolutely can be fraud, though. If you're
They
finding
didn't-
money and you're going, hey, hold on, if you're finding money in USAID and being like, what the fuck is this massive thing for? It seems like we're wasting like a ton of money here. And then all of a sudden you find out that the CIA took some of that money to create a Twitter alternative in Cuba, such as Zunazeo in 2014, as reported by the AP, and then used money for a completely different thing that wasn't on the books that the American public doesn't know anything about, so that they can try and foment revolutions in Cuba. That's fucking fraud, right? But it starts with going, where the fuck is this money going, and being able to figure out where our money's going, and be like, dude, I fucking
all of that was posted
Trump.
on the
I fucking
USA
hate
website.
Elon, but like you guys are just being so like this Reddit energy of like actually is just
Well, you
so
call
fucking
it
dumb.
you call it Reddit energy because you have no fucking idea what the difference between these two things is. Just because you don't agree with the purpose of a program,
I'm a
does not mean
libertarian.
it's
I
fraudulent.
absolutely understand fraud. I understand
know
that
you
there
don't
are
like any
fucking
government
9
program,
common
but that's
law.
what it means.
That there are 9 common law reasons
Every
that you can
time
define something as
Fabian
fraud.
says he's a
I talk about
libertarian,
fraud in
it's
contracts
shocking.
all the fucking time. Like
Juno,
what I'm saying is
Well, you
that
fail to
fraud, waste, and
consider
abuse
Hale
is a
Dandelion,
common
Dandy-
fucking term
Dandy-
that people
Dandy-
use.
whatever the fuck.
Go ahead, Shade. Go ahead,
You're
Shade.
fucking
Give it a try.
retarded.
Give it a
I'm
try,
out.
Shade.
Like
The
whatever.
The state's
Like,
taxing
do
money
you
is
think-
also
so
theft.
first of all, fraud
So they
takes time
shouldn't
to
do it
litigate,
either.
right?
Public
We're 50
education
days
is
into
theft.
this administration. Juna, do you want to make a bet, or we're making bets here, that there will be no cases of fraud over the next 4 years that are litigated?
Zero? There are cases of fraud under Democratic administration. So
We
no, I
wouldn't
don't
take
wanna-
that bet because we all admitted there's some level of waste, fraud, and abuse in all these programs.
But then what's your argument? You're saying there
My
is
argument-
no fraud. No, I'm not talking
Here, you know
about
what?
Econoboi. I'm
The
talking
chatter,
about
the
Juno.
chatter,
Juno.
the chatter asked
Okay.
for example cases of fraud, and what
Okay, fair,
immediately
fair.
Fabian went to is the Doge website, where they just list out $1 million here, $1 million here for programs
doesn't mean it's not fraud.
that the government disagrees with.
because
But it doesn't
fraud
mean it's
wastes
fraud.
It's not fraud.
It doesn't mean it's not fraud.
Dude, it's like beating my head into a brick wall listening to how fucking
would.
like actually your energy is here. Listen, I'm going to repeat my argument again. Fraud, waste, and abuse is a term that is used by people in government and in NGOs and people talking about politics all the time. That is a catch-all phrase for money that shouldn't be going somewhere. Okay? DOGE's purview is not actually to litigate or deeply investigate fraud. DOGE's purview is to look for inefficiencies, to look for places where there's a bunch of money and we don't seem to be getting a large return on it, or it doesn't seem to be giving us what it is that we want, and then give that information to the presidency as an advisor so that he can then determine whether or not we should investigate for fraud or we should just cut
What
the
I'm telling
programs,
you,
etc.
the part of what you said of money that shouldn't be going somewhere is a political question, not a like legal or like moral question of like, is this money
fucking-
being misspent?
Yeah, welcome to fucking politics. People
Okay.
vote,
Yes.
and then some
Exactly.
people lose, and
doesn't
people have
mean it's
different
fraudulent.
subjective opinions about where money
Yes,
should
but
and
that doesn't
shouldn't
mean
go.
it's fraudulent spending just because a new
But it
administration
doesn't mean
comes
it's
in.
not fraudulent.
Dude, you are-
Are,
oh my God.
Are you claiming that all of the waste that Doge has uncovered right now cannot be litigated into fraud at some point or another? Because
I
that would
I
be
would
an
say a vast
Never
majority
made
of
that
it,
claim.
the vast majority of it would not ever be
I-
litigated because
I
they know
agree
they would
with
So you admit some of it is.
exactly.
Like, yeah, I never claimed this. Of course, some government
God.
like waste is fraudulent. I'm
Sometimes
saying
we have
you
to say
linking
this.
the Doge website with just like bullet points on bullet points of here are all the things we cut and saying there's your fraud is obviously bullshit because a lot of these
That's
things are
not
programs.
what I
You just
fucking
fund
did
it.
or
That's
said.
the idea.
I said you can look at all of the things that they're investigating and that
Okay,
they're
let me
targeting,
try
and
this.
all of the
Let me try
receipts
this.
are
Can you
there.
give us one example, right, just for the sake of what you consider fraudulent spending that Doge has uncovered?
I gave you one. That
Just
Doge
one
is
example.
uncovered?
I
No,
know you gave us
it's
the-
been
you gave
fucking
us
2
the
months.
website.
You can't make that claim. Nobody
time to
could make that
litigate.
claim because you find a bunch of money that you're like, what the fuck is this? And then it takes time and it has to be sent through other processes.
Fair enough.
Congratulations, government's slow.
Is it, if you have software licenses, like, is that fraud if you're paying for 30,000 licenses and 100 are being used? Is that fraud?
No.
No.
I mean, once again,
It's
like
waste, for
none
sure,
of us,
but-
none of us would disagree that there's some level of fraud, waste, and abuse in these programs. But like one of the reasons why I think people on the left, and especially like pro-efficient governments, like I know as much as people meme on the leftists, like there's really, really efficient ways to run governments. I mean, look at the Nordic countries; they have a very left disposition, but their governments are very, very efficiently run. There's ways to reconcile these things. The problem in part is because we already have institutions that do look into this stuff. And so ironically, by creating a redundant government institution that looks into fraud, waste, and abuse in these programs, we've created more inefficiency and more bureaucracy and, less efficient.
We should have put him in
methods
charge of the
government.
GAO, right?
Well, I mean, no, James memes on that, and that's a
Well-
really stupid point, James, but it's transitively smart because,
Well,
yeah, like I think if
I
you
get
were
what
to
you're
say,
saying.
for
I
instance,
really do.
Yeah, like James, that's the point though. Like if you were to say, "Hey, I'm going to make Elon," like this would be an insane thing to do, obviously. But if you were to say, "I'm going to appoint Elon to be the head of the GAO," that would just like immediately make more sense than starting another government department, right? How is that
I
more
understand.
efficient? Yeah, like it makes no sense.
And
Okay,
what
I've
they did was they
understood.
renamed the
Yeah,
Why
Obama
didn't
to
Trump
Doge.
do that?
Okay, I do
So
have
why
other.
wouldn't?
Yeah, I
They
do have
renamed one that already exists to Doge. That's what they really did, like legally speaking. So you could say that that thing already existed, and they just repurposed it. You could say they did that.
Let me get through these other super chats, and then we are kind of wrapping up, right? And so I don't want
let's
to keep you
wrap.
guys here forever. I'm not Hamas. I won't hold you hostage. Let's keep going. Let's read these super chats, and then we'll get to some last questions, etc. Okay. $2
Sorry,
for
somebody in my
Testicle
chat.
Johnson's. Fabio L. Okay, thank you. Ariel Fernandez for $2.
Isn't that the
He's
guy?
very-
Hold on, isn't that the guy that wants China to invade Taiwan? I'll
He
fucking
was that
take
guy who gave me
L.
$5.
I'll take that L close to my heart and cherish it as a compliment.
Ariel Fernandez for $2. Who's ready for Trump's golden recession? Thank you for the $2. Okay, $10 from Psychonaut. Since most assets and consumer goods are in the hands of a small few, how do you guys think we can keep the money saved by whichever plan you wish around the regular worker? And 10 more additional dollars to continue. Saying as the more money you put in, people's pockets will be spent and sent right back to the wealthy class. Thank you for the $20 total. Go ahead, gang.
You make sure to do that by taxing it and giving the money to them. That's the best way to make sure that lower income people have the money that they need. In part, we already do that by means-tested welfare benefits, but because I care about government efficiency, that's actually pretty inefficient. I don't want to pay a government bureaucrat to drug test a welfare recipient or to make sure they're filling out enough applications to be satisfactory. I think they just need to get the cash that they need. That's a much more efficient way to run our welfare system.
There's like one thing, I think it's called a freedom fund. I forget the exact word, but you give a kid $500
Freedom
and you
dividend.
invest it in the
Baby
S&P
bonds.
500 when they're a child, and then they get it out when they're 18, so that they get to learn about compound growth, right? So if we could find a way to get assets to people, not just money but assets, be that stocks or houses or some kind of asset to people, that would be a way for regular people to keep wealth, to keep money, and to have more security, I feel.
Well, the right-wing state of Alaska has a sovereign wealth fund that they use to give thousands of dollars a year in income to families who need it. And of course, this is a great idea. I think we should do Alaska for America. We should have a sovereign wealth fund equivalent per person size in America, but for all American citizens. It works for Alaska. It can work for the rest of America, and it'd be really good for people.
You know
Trump
why they
made a
have
wealth
that,
fund.
though, right?
Trump just
They
made a
have-
sovereign wealth fund. But
I agree.
Wait,
I've got questions there.
He
I do,
instructed
but,
his treasury to look into it.
Well, look, I mean, we've looked
Right, but
into a
you know
sovereign
why
wealth
the
fund.
Alaska? You know why Alaska has it though, right?
because
They passed a bill to start it. That's why.
Well, no, it's
spoil
because
money.
it's because they were an independent territory, and then the U.S. shipped in a bunch of fucking military and government workers so they could vote for statehood, and then the overwhelming majority of Alaska's wildlife and property is state-owned, and it's incredibly difficult for people living there to be able to accrue new property, to get places that would be beneficial for them to homestead. It's like hush money almost in a certain way. It's like a here, shut up money from the oil industry and large corporations that are working in interest with the state.
No, but Fabian,
It's just
that's
more
not at all.
corruption.
Fabian, that's not at all what that is. Okay, when you collectivize like hundreds of thousands of dollars of wealth per person, that's not like a giveaway to the oil companies. It greatly lowers wealth inequality
It's
in
not what I was
Alaska.
saying.
Okay, Fabian, either way, I don't think that the oil industry in Alaska appreciates being taxed at like 25% extra to fund the sovereign wealth fund of Alaska. Okay, I think in general, they would probably advocate for not doing that, doing the opposite of that. And, I think a sovereign wealth fund for America with that similar sort of institutional structure would do very well. And to the person who asked that question, that's just a very
Econoboi
effective
supports
way.
Trump.
Well, look, I support the
Bro.
idea of a creation of a
Hey.
sovereign wealth fund. I mean, I'm perfectly capable of agreeing with Trump on some issues, but the institutional design matters a lot.
The $5 million
Okay.
bean card.
With that, we've spent 2 fun-filled hours in this discussion, in this debate. I will say this: it was 1,000 times better than yesterday's debate. So, Thank y'all for being here. Thank y'all for participating. Gang, if you've enjoyed this show, if you've liked what we had to say, you hit that like button. You hit that subscribe button. If you're watching me on Kicker on YouTube, Kicker on Twitch, hit the follow button. Okay? Tonight at 11:30 p.m. Eastern, I know it's super late, I'm going on to Patty Cake's channel to discuss Ukraine and issues
Thanks for the follow,
surrounding war. Is
Hail,
war
whatever.
always bad?
I appreciate it.
It should be fun. It's going to be exclusively on his channel, on Rumble. The link will be in my Discord, so if you want to see that, check that out. Next week, on Monday, we're going to be talking about Mahmoud. I don't know how you say his name. Mahmoud Khalili, right? And how the government is, in my opinion, violating his First Amendment rights and deporting him or seeking to deport him. So that should be a good discussion. We're going to have LT on there. We're going to have Irrelevant, and I'm still looking for more people who think that guy should be deported.
Yes,
and
please.
the government's doing right, huh? If you want it, we set that up. But okay. Also Thursday, we're gonna have a debate on Christian nationalism. That should be fun as well. And yeah, that's what we got coming up. I'm gonna give each of these wonderful, lovely individuals a chance to have an outro, to give closing arguments, closing thoughts, and to tell people where you can find them. I have links to all their stuff in my description of my YouTube channel. So if you've liked what they had to say, or if you've hated what they have to say, you can go and you can click on that link and you go to their channel or their X page or whatever, right? Whatever I had available is what I liked, okay? We're going to start with Econoboi, and we're going to end with NewYorkShade. That's how we're going to go. Econoboi, close us out.
Sure. Well, thanks everybody for joining the debate. It was really fun talking with everybody. It's important to debate these issues, and I had a generally good time. When it comes to the topic at large, is the Trump economy basically, is it looking bad? Is it looking like we're going into a recession? We didn't really mechanically get into that quite as much as like the individual policies that Trump is pursuing, which is fine. Overall, I think that people have a lot of reason to be worried. There might be a recession sometime in the next year or two, which people kind of need to just prepare for, kind of be a little bit more cautious. And with regards to Trump's policies, I think that Trump's policies do contribute to like a higher probability of a recession. They contribute to worse economic environment for the rest of us. And certainly if the Republican wish list was to cut $800 billion out of Medicaid, to, cut hundreds of billions of dollars out of food stamps, if they actually do achieve that goal and, cut those programs by that substantial amount, you will see more impoverishment amongst the lowest income people in this society. Ironically, a lot of Trump supporters obviously would be hurt by that, and that would be really, really bad. So it's in all of our best interest to advocate against Trump's economic agenda and to try and fight back as best as we can in a political and peaceful way. Thanks for listening to me. And also econoboi.substack.com. So if you want to listen to me right, or read me right, I should say.
Oh, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. Thanks for coming on. Check him out, gang. Click his link. Fabian, please.
Yeah, I am Fabian Liberty. You can just find me on YouTube, predominantly, Twitter there. I'm never going to call it X. X is a stupid fucking name. Twitter was just so much better. Nevertheless, so I think, agreeing with what Econoboi said a little bit in terms of the discussion as opposed to the overall topic. The problem with the topic, and not to shit on you, Wick, it's too early to really know any of these things, right? We have no idea what the economy is going to look like in 6 months, and more importantly, we have no idea, and this is really important. Trump has been talking out of two sides of his fucking mouth when it comes to tariffs. On one side of his mouth, it's tariffs are the greatest thing ever. Tariffs will save this country. Tariffs always work. Massive tariffs. We don't need taxes, etc. And then in his actions and in some of his other speeches, he recognizes that tariffs harm everybody, but that we're going to have a short-term hurt so that we can get real free trade with the people that will actually engage in free trade with us, and we can, have, a balanced kind of trade situation with countries that refuse to come to the table and stop committing like fraud and horrible things like China does with so many of their products. And I think that's probably the most destabilizing thing is that Trump is such a fucking drama queen, and he has this flair for the dramatic that he can't just give an honest policy and give an honest description of what it is that he wants to do. And so investors are like, well, what is he going to do? Because nobody fucking knows. And that's a big problem for the stock market. Maybe if it isn't so much for the art of the deal, and maybe if it isn't so much for, the MAGA people that are like, ready to stand behind them because they trust the process. Investors don't trust the fucking process. Investors are smarter than that. Again, you can find me, wherever you want there. Oh, and last thing, if Trump wants to save this economy, if Trump wants to do a better job of communicating and a better job of having a more sound economic argument, he needs to get on his fucking hands and knees to Elon Musk and say, please, for the love of God, can you find a way to make Catherine Wood an economic advisor for this administration? Right? She's, she is friends with Elon Musk. They have been very close. Like 15% of her portfolio is fucking, is like Tesla, SpaceX, X, etc. Right? Like she is adequately, she has the right ideas on debt, Bitcoin, things like that. Like they align very much, and that's what he needs to do if he wants to have smarter heads in the room, not fucking random billionaires.
Okay, thanks for being here. Really appreciate having you on. Check out his YouTube channel in my links. Go click on it. Give him a follow.
Hell yeah, Bob Marley. Thanks for the sub. I appreciate it. Second round.
Not a content creator. I just find this shit fun. And join PV if you want to do political action. Yeah.
Check him out, gang. I worked for PV for a little bit under contract. That was fun. But yeah, check. Well, I guess you can't check him out because he's not a content creator. But hey, when he comes on and when he's interested in a topic I have to discuss, we'll bring him on and we'll let him go the rounds here. So thank you for being on. Really appreciate you. And again, apologies for the little kerfuffle of the scheduling and things like that. My bad. James Meese, go ahead.
Hi, I'm James Meese. James Neil Meese. You can follow me on X. Links in his YouTube there. I try to be reasonable. I would say I'm a little center left, but I like to, give people chances. I didn't vote for Trump. I kind of think he's a con man and doesn't understand a lot of things. But still, if he fails, we all fail, right? If his administration can spend less and or get our debt under control, that'll be a win. If he can get more manufacturing, that would be a win. And if we can remain on top for AI, that is very important. I do think that David Sachs is probably one of his best appointees. I've followed that guy for years. He's our AI czar, so I was very glad to see that. And yes, I do think we should be worried. The topic of today's meeting. But long term, I am bullish on humanity and the United States. If there's one thing the USA is great at, it is making money, right? And I wouldn't bet against us.
Well, thank you for being here. I have a link to his Twitter in my description. You can check that out. Appreciate you, man. Nonfon.
Yeah, Trump's policies are bad. Okay. My money's still on no recession, but I do think especially the bottom 20% of Americans will be hurt by these policies. They'll be hurt by tariffs. They'll be hurt by the spending cuts. If you want a good economy, target NGDP, okay? Do a LVT and do a DBCFT. Econoboi has a good article about that. Not as good as Chase and Harrison's article, though, obviously. You can watch me stream YouTube at Nonfon, Twitch and Kick Nonfon420. Check me out if you want to watch me read boring stuff.
Thank you for being here, Nonfon. I do always appreciate you. And yeah, links to his YouTube channels in my description. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, first-time guest, hopefully not last-time guest, NewYorkShade. Go ahead.
Yep, NewYorkShade here, NewYorkShade on Twitter, where I'm extremely active. I appreciate everybody on this panel for taking my online debate virginity. Super hot, super sexy. It's I'm ready to do it again. Ultimately, to kind of wind this all down, the decisions that we need to make, and we should always be critical of Trump and hold him accountable because he is a wild card. But the decision and the delineation here is, do we think everything is fine now, and do we continue with the status quo of making tiny incremental changes that have no material impact in the long run, or do we want a real catalyst for change that will change the trajectory of this country altogether?
Okay, thank you. I have a link to his Twitter in my YouTube. Check him out. Give him a follow where he is apparently extremely active. And thank you for being here. With that, gang, we're going to end the show. So wait, bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay.
Shade, we can debate free trade anytime. Oh, he's already gone. Damn.
Yeah,
LDM.
Needed more
out
debate.
there like a lightning bolt. No, but thank you all of you for being here. I'm not live anymore, so you can say your slurs now. But no, it was fun.
Whoa, I'm
I
live.
really enjoyed it.
I'm live.
Okay, well, fair enough. But no, I think it was a good discussion. I hope everyone had fun. I hope you enjoyed it. And sorry for the technical hiccups, but we got through. Okay, cool. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
See ya.
See ya. Fuck, who was the other guy there? I need to send him a friend request. He's not in the group chat though, so. Fun time, Jesus. That NewYorkShade guy. I want to debate. I'll see if I can set up a debate about fucking globalism / free trade with him. God damn, that was 60% of Americans are working paycheck to paycheck. Globalism is hauling us out. That'd be fun. I think so. That guy will probably set up a debate with. I'll try to. The two Jubilee people, I probably will as well. I think Ben and George were the two I was most interested in reaching out to. Don't know if they'll agree to it. Okay, but we'll see. That was fun, though. That was epic. If you want to chat with me live, sub here or go to Nonfon420 on Twitch or Kick via the links below. Once again, please like and sub to help with the algorithm, and consider sending a donation through YouTube Super Thanks to directly support me, and I'll make sure to reply to any question you ask. See you guys next time.